In the very depths of the collective memory of mankind, through the thickness of thousands of years, there is a barely perceptible but persistent whisper of bygone worlds, telling about the great civilizations that once flourished on our planet, and then, for reasons that are not fully understood, disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only fragments of grandiose ruins, mysterious artifacts, and myths that were lost. Modern science often seeks to explain it as nothing more than fiction. This whisper, sometimes barely audible, and sometimes reaching the power of a mighty thunderclap, invites us to a fascinating journey through the forgotten pages of Earth's history, inviting us to reconsider the established ideas about the development of humanity and its place in the universe. We are used to a linear, sequential chronology, where civilization emerged in Mesopotamia and Egypt several thousand years ago, gradually evolving from primitive communities to complex state formations. However, an increasing number of unexplained archaeological finds, striking similarities in the mythologies of peoples separated by thousands of kilometers, and anomalies in geological data persistently challenge this convenient and simple picture, suggesting a much more complex, multi-layered, and possibly cyclical history of our world. The purpose of this extensive work is not just to recount famous legends about lost continents like Atlantis, Lemuria, or Hyperborea, or about vanished civilizations whose traces may be hidden under the thickness of sand, ice, or ocean waters. Our task is much broader. We aim to conduct a comprehensive analysis of the existing evidence, from ancient manuscripts and oral traditions to modern scientific discoveries and controversial archaeological interpretations, to consider the possibility that these myths are not fantasies, but distorted but nevertheless real memories of once existing highly developed societies that have reached incredible heights in technological, social, and cultural development, in spiritual development, and then, for reasons that we have yet to explore, disappeared into oblivion. We will analyze not only the facts themselves, but also their possible interpretations, trying to find hidden connections and deep meanings that may escape the traditional approach. What was their knowledge of the cosmos, of the nature of reality, of technologies that might seem like magic to us? The upcoming study will address many key questions that, intertwined with each other, create a complex web of hypotheses. We will explore what the ancient texts say about these societies, exploring not only well-known sources, but also less studied, esoteric treatises that may contain grains of truth. We will dive into the world of megalithic structures, whose scale and accuracy still cause confusion among engineers and historians. How were these colossal blocks erected? Who had the necessary knowledge to process and move them? Perhaps the answers lie in long-forgotten construction methods or even in the use of unknown forms of energy. Special attention will be paid to anomalous artifacts, or OOPArts, out-of-place artifacts, objects found in geological layers that are significantly older than the expected appearance of humans or the known chronology of technological development. Whether they are ancient batteries, complex mechanisms, or processed metals, these finds challenge established ideas about time and technology. In addition, we will look at the geological and climatic changes that may have caused the disappearance of these civilizations. Great floods, glaciations, sea level changes, pole shifts, or even cosmic catastrophes. How real could these events described in myths be? And how could they affect the fate of advanced societies? We will also touch on underwater archaeology, which increasingly reveals structures on the ocean floor that look too regular for natural formations, fueling interest in sunken cities. An important aspect will be the study of esoteric traditions and secret societies that may have preserved and passed down some of the knowledge about these bygone worlds from generation to generation, protecting them from the general public for their own reasons. Their symbols, rituals, and legends may be the keys to deciphering long-forgotten information. This study is not just an attempt to prove or disprove the existence of Atlantis. It is a call to rethink the entire fabric of human history. If there really were one or more highly developed civilizations on Earth before our own, this radically changes our understanding of progress, development, and even our own uniqueness in the universe. This makes us think about the cyclical nature of history, how civilizations can reach their peak and then collapse, leaving only hints of their existence behind. We may not be the first or only attempt at intelligence on this planet, and our current position is just one step in a much longer and more complex cycle. Thus, I invite you to join this exciting intellectual adventure. We'll be piecing together puzzle pieces scattered around the world and across the timeline, trying to reconstruct a picture of lost civilizations and continents. This is not only an attempt to understand the past, but also a way to take a fresh look at our present and prepare for the future. After all, if we realize that great civilizations can disappear, then perhaps we can learn from their fate in order to avoid repeating their mistakes and ensure the survival of our own, still so fragile, world. Each step in this exploration brings us closer to understanding that the Earth's history is far richer, more mysterious, and more amazing than we ever imagined, and that the whispers of bygone worlds may not just be an echo of the past, but a warning and message from ancient times. Plato's Atlantis, a legend or a forgotten reality of ancient times. Of all the lost civilizations and continents whispered about in the history and myths of mankind, none occupies such a prominent place in the collective consciousness or causes so much heated debate as Atlantis. This name, which has become synonymous with greatness and tragic doom, was ingrained in the culture thanks to the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who not only mentioned it in passing, but provided a detailed and surprisingly specific description of this powerful island state in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias. In these works, written around 360 BC, Plato describes a highly developed civilization that, in his words, was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, that is, outside the current Strait of Gibraltar, in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. He describes Atlantis not as a poetic fiction or allegory, but as a historical fact, information about which he received from his ancestor Solon, who, in turn, heard it from the Egyptian priests from the city of Sais. These priests claimed that the history of Atlantis was carefully recorded in their temple archives and preserved for thousands of years, while the Greeks, in their opinion, lost their historical records due to a series of cataclysms and started all over again. According to Plato's account, Atlantis was not just a large island, but a whole continental entity, majestic and prosperous. Its rulers, descendants of the god Poseidon, possessed untold wealth, and their society reached incredible heights in various fields of knowledge. Plato describes in detail the capital of Atlantis, which was built according to a complex circular scheme with concentric circles of land and water connected by channels. The city was decorated with magnificent temples, palaces, and bridges decorated with gold, silver, and orichalcum, a mysterious metal that Plato said was prized above gold and possessed special properties now lost to humanity or the result of advanced technology. The Atlanteans had not only the sophisticated architectural and engineering skills to build such grand structures, but also the deep knowledge of astronomy, navigation, and perhaps even the forms of energy that enabled them to maintain such a high standard of living. Their army was large and powerful, and they tried to establish their hegemony over neighboring nations, even invading the Mediterranean and threatening Athens. However, according to Plato, the moral decline that gradually gripped the Atlanteans led to their arrogance and greed. They deviated from their divine principles, and this provoked the wrath of Zeus, who decided to punish them. The culmination of this divine punishment was a catastrophic event. In one terrible day and night, Atlantis was swallowed up by the sea, disappearing into the abyss as a result of earthquakes and floods. Plato dates this event to approximately 9,000 years before Solon's time, which corresponds to approximately 11,000 BCE. This date is extremely important because it relates the death of Atlantis to the end of the last ice age, when there were significant geological and climatic changes on the planet, including the melting of huge ice sheets and rising sea levels. For centuries, many scholars and historians have treated Plato's account of Atlantis as a philosophical allegory or myth created to illustrate his ideas about the ideal state and moral decay. They argued that Plato probably drew inspiration from real catastrophes, such as the eruption of the Santorini volcano, Thera, and the demise of the Minoan civilization, which occurred much later, around 1600 BC, and moved these events to a deeper past. However, proponents of the actual existence of Atlantis point to the remarkable detail and accuracy of Plato's geographical, social, and chronological data. If this was pure fiction, then why describe in such detail its location, size, and even the structure of the city? In addition, Plato's reference to the sea that became impassable due to the abundance of silt left after the destruction of Atlantis sounds like a real observation of the consequences of a major cataclysm. The search for Atlantis was conducted all over the world, changing geographical hypotheses from century to century. From the Caribbean, where some researchers point to anomalous underwater structures in the Bimini area, to the Mediterranean, where the island of Santorini, Thera, and the Cretan Minoan civilization are the most popular candidates. Other theories suggest its location off the coast of North Africa, in the Azores, or even in the North Sea. Each of these hypotheses has its own weaknesses and strengths, but none has received universal scientific recognition. However, modern technologies such as high-precision sonar, satellite images of the seafloor, and the use of underwater vehicles open up new opportunities for search. These technologies have already made it possible to detect structures on the ocean floor that look too regular for natural formations, fueling interest in this millennial mystery. For example, in the area of the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic, where according to many theories Atlantis should have been located, underwater plateaus and mountains were discovered that could have been the peaks of a sunken continent if the sea level had been much lower. It is important to note that geological data do confirm significant changes in the level of the world's oceans during the period indicated by Plato. At the end of the last ice age, about 12,000 tons, 10,000 years ago, the melting of huge ice sheets led to rapid and significant sea level rise, flooding vast coastal areas that were previously dry land. Many of these areas may have been inhabited and developed, but their footprints are now deep underwater. This provides quite a scientific justification for the possibility of the existence of sunken lands, although not necessarily on the scale of Plato's continent. The discussion of Atlantis is also closely intertwined with the question of the lost golden age humanity. Many ancient cultures, independently of each other, tell of a period of great prosperity and harmony when people lived in abundance and possessed deep knowledge before some cataclysm led to their downfall. If Atlantis was one of these civilizations, its demise could be the cause of the lost golden age and the beginning of a new, more difficult stage in human history, the memory of which has been preserved in the form of universal myths about floods and global catastrophes. Thus, Plato's Atlantis is much more than just an ancient legend or philosophical parable. This is a powerful cultural archetype that has motivated humanity to search for the truth about its past for thousands of years. Although direct, irrefutable archaeological evidence for its existence is still lacking, the very fact of its detailed description in the writings of Plato, as well as the constant appearance of unexplained underwater structures and geological data on significant changes in sea level in the distant past, do not allow us to completely dismiss this hypothesis. Atlantis serves as a reminder that our planet and its history may be much more complex and mysterious than we used to think. It forces us to rethink the possibilities of ancient civilizations and opens the door to the assumption that knowledge about highly developed societies could have been lost not only due to natural disasters, but also due to subsequent oblivion or purposeful concealment. The ongoing search for Atlantis isn't just a quest for myth, it's an attempt to recreate a long-forgotten chapter in the great book of Earth's history, a chapter that could radically change our understanding of human origins and cosmic place in this world. After all, if Atlantis really existed, then it was not just a lost continent, but evidence of another, perhaps more developed path that was interrupted, but whose echoes continue to resound in the depths of centuries, calling us to the solution. Lemuria and Mu, the sunken worlds of the Pacific Ocean and their mysterious legacy. If Atlantis represents the tragic grandeur of Western lost land mythology, then on the other side of the globe, in the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean, there is an equally fascinating and deeply rooted legend of the continent of Lemuria, or Mu, in esoteric and occult teachings. This concept, although not as ancient in its written representation as Plato's Atlantis, nevertheless has a huge impact on the minds of researchers and supporters of alternative history, offering a completely different picture of the ancient world, where highly developed civilizations flourished and disappeared, long before the appearance of known historical cultures. Initially, in the mid-19th century, the idea of Lemuria emerged in the scientific community as a purely geological hypothesis proposed by zoologist Philip Sclater in 1864 to explain the then unexplained geographical distribution of lemurs, which live in Madagascar and India, but are absent in Africa and the Middle East. Sclater suggested the existence of a now sunken continent or land bridge in the Indian Ocean that enabled the migration of these primates. However, quite quickly, this purely scientific hypothesis of a land bridge was taken up and significantly transformed by esoteric teachings, in particular by Helena Blavatsky, the founder of Theosophy, in her monumental work, The Secret Doctrine. Blavatsky expanded the concept of Lemuria, turning it from a geological structure into the cradle of one of the indigenous races of humanity that existed millions of years ago. She was describing Lemuria as a vast continent that occupied a large part of the Pacific and Indian Oceans, inhabited by a race of beings who possessed incredible physical and spiritual abilities, were androgynous and could communicate telepathically. Their civilization, according to theosophical teachings, was incredibly advanced in spiritual terms, but, as in the case of Atlantis, it suffered a tragic fate as a result of a great cataclysm. At the beginning of the 20th century, the concept of a lost continent in the Pacific Ocean received a new development thanks to the British military and writer James Churchward, Colonel Churchward, who popularized the name Mu in his books, Mu. Churchward claimed to have discovered ancient tablets in India containing records of the continent of Mu, which he said was a vast empire stretching thousands of kilometers across the Pacific Ocean. He described Mu as a Garden of Eden inhabited by millions of people who possessed the highest scientific and spiritual knowledge, surpassing modern achievements. Mu was the center of the world, and its colonies, according to Churchward, spread all over the globe, including Egypt, India, and Central America. However, like Atlantis, Mu suffered a catastrophe. According to Churchward, about 12,000 years ago, the continent was destroyed by a series of colossal earthquakes and tsunamis that caused it to completely submerge, leaving only the peaks of former mountains on the surface, which turned into modern islands of Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia, such as Hawaii, Easter Island, and Fiji. The legends of Lemuria and Mu, despite their esoteric origins, find echoes in the mythology and folklore of the Pacific Islands. Many Polynesian, Melanesian, and Micronesian cultures have stories of ancient sunken lands, great floods that engulfed vast territories, and previous generations of people who possessed incredible knowledge and powers. For example, the inhabitants of Easter Island have legends about Hotumatua, who brought his people to the island after the destruction of their homeland in the ocean. Such stories, passed down by word of mouth over the centuries, may not just be coincidences, but vague but nevertheless real memories of grand geological events that changed the landscape of the Pacific Ocean. The question of material evidence for the existence of Lemuria or Mu remains the subject of heated debate. From a geological point of view, the concept of a huge continent that occupied a large part of the Pacific Ocean seems unlikely due to plate tectonics. The Pacific Plate is one of the most active and submerging plates, making it unlikely that large continental masses will survive. However, this does not exclude the possibility of large islands or archipelagos that may have been flooded. Modern underwater research is indeed uncovering mysterious structures on the Pacific Ocean floor. One of the most intriguing examples is Podvodny Monument, the Yonaguni underwater monument off the coast of Japan. It is a massive stepped sandstone structure that looks like a giant pyramid or city ruins, with clear angles, terraces, and steps. Although the geological consensus tends to be that it is a natural formation, some researchers argue that its regular geometric shapes and the presence of traces of processing indicate an artificial origin, possibly created by a civilization that existed when sea levels were significantly lower. If Yonaguni is indeed an artificial structure, its estimated age of 10,000 years or more defies all known beliefs about ancient civilizations in this part of the world. In addition to Yonaguni, there are other underwater anomalies. In some areas of the Pacific Ocean, for example, around the Hawaiian Islands, underwater roads and walls have been discovered that do not fit into natural geological processes. Although many of them may be the result of unique volcanic formations, some of them remain unsolved. You should also take into account the geological instability of the Pacific region, known as the Ring of Fire, where most of the earthquakes and volcanic eruptions on the planet occur. It is such catastrophic events, giant tsunamis, massive volcanic eruptions, and rapid land subsidence due to tectonic shifts, that could have caused the demise of vast island systems or even entire microcontinents in the region, if they ever existed. As for the legacy of these lost civilizations, proponents of their existence point to striking similarities in symbolism, architecture, and mythology between cultures separated by vast ocean expanses. For example, the common motifs of pyramids, solar cults, flood legends, and great teachers who came from beyond the sea are found in ancient Egypt, as well as among the Mayans, Aztecs, and Incas. Some researchers suggest that these similarities are not due to random parallels, but to a common source, a highly developed pre-civilization such as Lemuria or Mu, which spread its knowledge and culture around the world before disappearing. Their technologies, while not always understood by modern scientists, may have involved not only manipulating physical forces, but also energies that we are just beginning to explore, such as telepathy, levitation, or using crystals to generate energy. Thus, Lemuria and Mu. These are not just esoteric concepts, but powerful archetypes of lost worlds that force us to rethink the depth and complexity of human history. Although direct, irrefutable scientific evidence for their existence on the scale described in theosophical teachings has not yet been found, the ongoing underwater discoveries, inexplicable structures, and persistence of myths in various Pacific Rim cultures do not allow us to completely dismiss these hypotheses. These lost continents serve as a reminder that our planet hides many unsolved mysteries, and its past may have been much richer and more dramatic than we imagine. Exploring these myths and potential evidence isn't just a fantasy chase. It's an attempt to reconstruct long-forgotten chapters in the great book of Earth's history, chapters that could radically change our understanding of human origins, early civilizations, and the potential causes of their extinction. After all, if these worlds really existed and were lost, then they carry invaluable lessons for our own future, calling us to caution, wisdom, and a deeper understanding of the dynamics of planetary change. Hyperborea and the secrets of the polar lands, lost civilizations on top of the world. After we delved into the legends of the sunken worlds of Atlantis in the Atlantic and Lemuria, Mu in the Pacific Ocean, our journey through the forgotten pages of Earth's history leads us to another equally intriguing and shrouded secret area. The polar regions, which according to ancient myths and esoteric teachings, may have been home to the highly advanced civilization of Hyperborea. Unlike its southern cousins, Hyperborea is not associated with catastrophic flooding, but rather with disappearing from ordinary perception, going to another dimension or transformation, which makes its mystery even more complex and multifaceted. The origins of the legend of Hyperborea go deep into ancient Greek mythology, where it is described as a distant mythical country located beyond the north wind of Boreas. It was a place of eternal sunshine, abundance, and bliss, where people lived in harmony, without disease, old age, and death, having a special closeness to the gods. Greek authors such as Herodotus and Pindar mention Hyperborea as a real, if difficult, place, linking it to Apollo, who was believed to have spent the winter months in this sacred region. In more recent times, especially in the esoteric and theosophical teachings of the 19th and 20th centuries, the concept of Hyperborea has expanded significantly, turning from a mythical country into the ancestral home of an ancient, highly developed race or civilization. These teachings often describe Hyperborea as the cradle of humanity, or at least one of its indigenous races, which existed at a time when the climate in the polar regions was much milder and more favorable, perhaps even tropical, before the last ice age and the shift of the Earth's axis. Proponents of this hypothesis point to paleoclimatic evidence that suggests that in distant geological epochs, hundreds of millions of years ago, the polar regions did indeed have a much warmer climate than they do now, with lush vegetation and no ice cover. If a highly developed civilization could have existed during this period, then its traces would have been buried under a multi-kilometer layer of ice or transformed by geological processes. According to some esoteric texts and legends, the inhabitants of Hyperborea possessed incredible technological and spiritual knowledge. They supposedly possessed the secrets of controlling energy, had advanced flying machines, perhaps even the ability to teleport or manipulate space-time. Their society was organized on the principles of harmony and wisdom, where spiritual development prevailed over material development. The disappearance of Hyperborea is usually attributed not to catastrophic flooding, as in the case of Atlantis, but to global climate changes, such as the onset of an ice age that made the region uninhabitable. However, some theories go further, suggesting that the Hyperboreans did not die, but went to underground shelters, creating extensive networks of tunnels and caves underground, or moved to another dimension, using their advanced knowledge, becoming invisible to ordinary human perception. This idea of an inner Earth, or Agarthy, is often associated with Hyperborea, suggesting the existence of hidden worlds beneath the planet's surface, where descendants of ancient civilizations thrive. Myths and legends about the mysterious lands in the north are found not only among the Greeks. Norse sagas speak of Asgard, the abode of the gods, located somewhere in the far north. Slavs have legends about Belavodji, a wonderful country in the north, where sages and keepers of ancient knowledge live. Indian texts, such as the Puranas, mention Mount Meru, which is the center of the world and is located in the far north. These striking coincidences in different seemingly unrelated cultures may point to a common source of ancient memory of a once-existing civilization in the polar regions. Perhaps these myths are distorted memories of an ancient polar paradise that existed before the Earth's climate changed. The current search for Hyperborea faces enormous challenges due to the extreme Arctic conditions. However, some researchers and enthusiasts point to anomalies in the North Pole region. Theories about the existence of a hole at the pole through which you can get into the inner Earth, or about the presence of hidden oases heated by geothermal sources under the ice, periodically pop up in conspiracy circles. Some magnetic field anomalies in the polar regions are also sometimes interpreted as evidence of hidden structures or energy sources. The study of ancient maps, such as the Piri Reis map, which some claim depicts Antarctica's ice-free coastline, is also fueling interest in the possible existence of ancient civilizations in the polar regions when the climate was completely different. However, it is important to approach such interpretations with scientific caution, since many of these claims are not confirmed in official science. Perhaps if Hyperborea really existed, then its inhabitants had knowledge that allowed them not to depend on ordinary climatic conditions. We can talk about advanced energy management technologies that made it possible to create local heat zones in cold regions, or the ability to use the Earth's geothermal energy more efficiently than we do. This could explain why they could thrive in conditions that now seem unsuitable for highly developed life. If they did go to underground shelters, it would also require incredible engineering solutions to create and sustain life in the depths of the planet. Legends about Agarthy and Shambhala, which according to esoteric teachings are hidden underground cities or spiritual centers, are often associated with Hyperborea, suggesting the existence of a whole network of secret shelters. The study of these polar myths and hypotheses is of profound significance. It challenges our understanding of the capabilities of ancient civilizations and what the Earth looked like in the distant past. If highly developed societies once flourished in the polar regions, this means that the history of mankind is much older and more complex than we used to think, and that we may have lost not just individual artifacts, but entire epochs of knowledge and technology. The melting of glaciers observed in the modern world, even if caused by anthropogenic causes, may in the future expose new, previously unknown lands and possibly ancient artifacts that will confirm or refute these bold hypotheses. New technologies, such as ice-penetrating radars and deep-sea drilling, could provide much-needed evidence or finally dispel these myths. Thus, Hyperborea and the secrets of the polar lands. They represent another unique chapter in the Book of Lost Civilizations. It offers not only a story about paradise lost, but also a possible way to adapt and survive in extreme conditions, as well as methods of disappearing or escaping into hidden realities. This legend, supported by some anomalous data and universal myths, makes us think about the limits of human capabilities in ancient times and how little we know about those who lived on our planet millions of years ago. The polar regions, still some of the most unexplored corners of the Earth, continue to keep their secrets, and perhaps it is there, under many kilometers of ice, that the remains of the very once thriving civilization rest, whose history can change our understanding of everything we know about the past of mankind. Their story may not be about death, but about transformation and departure into other forms of being, which makes their legacy even more mysterious and intriguing. The Great Flood and Cosmic Cataclysms, a universal myth about the disappearance of ancient worlds. Exploring hypotheses about lost continents such as Atlantis, Lemuria, and Hyperborea inevitably brings us to the central question that unites their destinies. What exactly led to their disappearance? In all these traditions, whether it is Plato's description of the destruction of Atlantis in one terrible day and night, or the stories about the sinking of Mu under the waters of the Pacific Ocean, the key motif is a catastrophic event on a planetary scale. This brings us to one of the most universal and deeply ingrained themes in the collective memory of mankind: the myth of the Great Flood, which is found in the mythology and religious texts of almost every nation on Earth, from the ancient Sumerians to Native Americans, from Indian Brahmins to the Aborigines of Australia. These stories, which are surprisingly similar in their basis, but differ in details, can be not just fiction or allegory, but a distant, distorted, but nevertheless real memory of global cosmic or geological cataclysms that repeatedly struck the Earth in its distant past, wiping out entire civilizations from the face of the planet and completely changing its geography. The story of the deluge is central to the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, where the wise Utnapishtim builds an ark at the direction of the gods to escape the catastrophe. In the biblical book of Genesis, the story of Noah and his ark is known to everyone. Ancient Indian texts, such as the Shatapatha Brahmana and the Mahabharata, tell of Manu being saved from the flood by a Vishavatar of Vishnu. The legends of indigenous peoples of the Americas, such as the Iroquois, Maya, Aztecs, and Incas, also contain detailed descriptions of the great waters that engulfed the world and the few survivors who revived humanity. The striking similarity of these stories, which emerged independently in geographically and culturally separated regions, cannot be explained by mere coincidence or borrowing. It strongly suggests that some grandiose event or series of events left a deep, indelible mark on the memory of all mankind, passed down from generation to generation through oral traditions and written texts. What could have caused such a comprehensive cataclysm, capable of destroying even highly developed civilizations and completely changing the face of the planet? There are several basic scientific and hypothetical explanations, each with its own arguments. One of the most discussed is the rapid melting of ice sheets at the end of the last ice age, which occurred approximately 10,000 years ago, which coincides with the date of the destruction of Atlantis, indicated by Plato. During this period, the huge masses of ice accumulated on the continents began to melt, causing a sharp and significant increase in the level of the world's oceans. Scientists estimate that sea levels have risen by tens or even more than 100 meters, flooding vast coastal areas that were previously land. These territories could have been fertile lands where ancient, now forgotten, civilizations flourished. If most of humanity at that time lived in these coastal zones, then such a rise in sea level, even if it occurred gradually by geological standards, for the ancient inhabitants would have felt like a catastrophic flood, engulfing their lands and cities. However, sea level rise alone cannot fully explain the extent of flood myths, which often describe a comprehensive flood that covers even high-altitude areas. This leads us to hypotheses about cosmic impacts. The impact of a large asteroid or comet on Earth could not only cause a giant tsunami that can bypass the planet several times, but also release huge amounts of steam and dust into the atmosphere, provoking rain and darkness, which corresponds to the descriptions of celestial signs before the flood in myths. Geological evidence confirms that the Earth has been bombarded from space several times in its history, and some of these events, such as the impact that created the Chicxulub crater, are associated with mass extinctions. A small but large enough asteroid that fell into the ocean could trigger devastating waves that would wipe out all coastal civilizations. Another hypothesis concerns a sharp shift of the Earth's poles or a significant change in the tilt of its axis. If, as a result of a cosmic collision or internal geodynamic processes, a rapid shift of the geographical poles occurred, this would lead to a redistribution of the mass of water on the planet, cause colossal earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and global floods. Such events could completely change climate zones, turning once fertile land into deserts or icy wastelands, which is consistent with myths about the sudden onset of cold weather or changing the location of the stars. For example, some researchers associate a hypothetical pole shift with the sudden onset of an ice age in the northern hemisphere, which could have caused the death of Hyperborea. It is also impossible to exclude the eruption of supervolcanoes. Large-scale eruptions, such as the one that occurred on Toba about 74,000 years ago, emit huge amounts of ash and gases into the atmosphere, causing a volcanic winter, a sharp drop in temperatures, acid rain, and global climate changes that can destroy vegetation and wildlife in vast areas. Although they do not directly cause a global flood, their effects could lead to the collapse of civilizations due to famine and disease, and subsequent heavy rains could be perceived as part of a flood. An intriguing aspect is the connection of these cataclysms with the hypothesis of the cyclical nature of the development of civilizations. If the Earth is periodically subjected to such devastating events, whether cosmic bombardment, pole shifts, or massive eruptions, then this explains why highly advanced civilizations could arise, peak, and then disappear without a trace, leaving no significant traces for future generations. Perhaps humanity or other intelligent species has repeatedly gone through cycles of development and decline over millions of years, each time starting almost from scratch after another planetary catastrophe. Flood myths, then, are not just stories of a single event, but collective memories of multiple cycles of destruction and rebirth. Some scientists and researchers, such as Charles Hapgood with his theory of crustal displacement, or Immanuel Velikovsky with his catastrophic hypotheses about the interaction of planets, have tried to find a scientific explanation for these myths, suggesting scenarios of sudden and large-scale planetary changes. Although their theories are often criticized for lacking empirical evidence and contradicting established scientific paradigms, they emphasize that the magnitude of flood myths requires an explanation that goes beyond local floods. Challenges in the study of this topic lie in the difficulty of accurately dating ancient cataclysms and linking them to specific myths. Geological and paleoclimatic data allow us to reconstruct the picture of the past, but they often provide only a general time frame. In addition, interpreting myths as literal historical records is always risky, since they were transmitted orally and could be distorted over time. However, ongoing studies of glacial cores, marine sediments, craters from fossilized meteorite impacts, and analysis of seismic activity may provide new evidence of large-scale disasters. A comparison of these data with a linguistic analysis of myths and their geographical distribution can help reveal the true roots of these universal traditions, thus the Great Flood and the idea of cosmic cataclysms. They are a powerful explanatory mechanism for the disappearance of lost civilizations and continents. This universal myth, which permeates all human cultures, is not just a fiction, but perhaps a distorted but nevertheless real memory of the grandiose planetary catastrophes that repeatedly changed the face of the Earth, erasing the traces of highly developed societies from its surface. These cataclysms, whether rapid sea level rise, impacts from space, pole shifts, or supervolcano eruptions, may have been the very events that interrupted the cycles of civilization, forcing survivors to start over and retain only scraps of knowledge about the Golden Age and its tragic end. Understanding these ancient catastrophes not only helps explain why great civilizations disappeared, but also serves as a grim but important warning for our own time, reminding us of the fragility of human existence in the face of the mighty forces of nature and the cosmos. OOPArts and anachronistic artifacts, tangible evidence of lost eras and forgotten technologies. If myths and legends about lost continents and world floods give us only vague memories of the catastrophic past, then material objects found in the most unexpected places in geological layers represent much more tangible and persistent material evidence of the existence of lost civilizations and technologies that, according to the official chronology, should not have existed at one time or another, a different era. These objects, known as OOPArts, out-of-place artifacts, or anachronistic artifacts, are one of the most intriguing yet controversial categories of evidence, challenging established beliefs about human history and its technological development. They represent objects found in geological strata or archaeological contexts that suggest their creation long before humanity, according to conventional science, reached the appropriate technological level. Studying these anomalies makes us think about the existence of highly developed cultures whose achievements were completely lost, or about contacts with extraterrestrial civilizations that could have left these mysterious traces. Let's take a look at some of the most prominent and widely discussed examples of OOPArts. One of the most striking is a hammer from London, USA, discovered in 1936 near the city of London, Texas. This hammer, which has an iron head and a wooden handle, was found immured in a limestone rock, the age of which, according to geologists, is from 100 to 140 million years. This refers to the Cretaceous period when dinosaurs lived on Earth, and intelligent life, especially about humans, was out of the question. If chemical analysis shows that the iron part of the hammer is made of iron with an extremely high purity, not typical of natural iron and not subject to rust, which is difficult to explain even by modern metallurgical processes without using oxygen, and the handle is petrified, then this poses a puzzle for science. Who created this tool, and how did it end up in such an ancient breed? Traditional explanations, such as a hammer hitting a rock crack at a relatively recent time, do not hold water when you consider that it was completely walled up and merged with the rock. Another well-known example is metal spheres from Klerksdorp, South Africa. These perfectly round metal balls, some of which have grooves along the equator, were found in pyrophyllite deposits that are estimated to be an incredible 2.8 billion years old. If these are really artificial objects and not natural concretions, as some geologists claim, then their existence in such ancient rocks is absolutely impossible to explain within the framework of traditional paleontology and archaeology. Who or what could have created such symmetrical objects at the dawn of Earth's existence, billions of years before the advent of multicellular life? Some of these spheres are said to emit a sound when they rotate around their axis, which adds to their mystery. The Baghdad Battery, discovered in 1938 in Iraq, is an earthen vessel with a copper cylinder inside and an iron rod. The artifact dates back to about 2000 BC. Experiments have shown that this seemingly primitive object can generate an electric current when filled with an electrolyte, such as grape juice. If it was indeed an ancient battery, then its existence indicates that ancient Mesopotamian civilizations, or their predecessors, had knowledge of electricity thousands of years before its official discovery. Although there are theories that it may have been a scroll storage vessel or a ritual object, its functionality as a galvanic cell remains intriguing and requires further explanation. Traces of giant shoe or footprints found in ancient coal seams that are more than hundreds of millions of years old also raise questions. If these footprints are the tracks of intelligent beings, then this indicates their existence at a time when, according to science, dinosaurs or even more primitive life forms lived on Earth. Some of these prints found in the United States and other countries show a striking similarity to human footprints, but their age makes such a coincidence almost incredible. In addition to these well-known OOPArts, there are other, less hyped but no less mysterious finds. These may be microchips or tiny springs found in millions of years of geological strata in Russia, strikingly reminiscent of elements of modern electronics, but their size and location call into question the possibility of a natural origin. Or the unexplained golden airplanes found in South America and Central America, dating back to the pre-Columbian era, which, when aerodynamically analyzed, show the ability to fly steadily, resembling modern aviation, although officially it is believed that flying was invented only in the XX century. How do we explain these anachronistic artifacts? Official science often offers explanations that seek to fit these objects into existing paradigms. For example, metal spheres can be explained as natural nodules, and a hammer is a relatively recent object that got into ancient rocks through a crack. However, these explanations often seem far-fetched and not always satisfactory, especially when it comes to multiple finds and the astounding complexity of some artifacts. Proponents of alternative theories offer several explanations. One of them is the existence of forgotten, highly developed ancient civilizations on Earth that were destroyed by global cataclysms, such as the Great Flood we discussed earlier, and whose technologies were superior or comparable to ours. OOPArts in this case are the wreckage or remnants of their technological heritage, which somehow miraculously survived. If Atlantis or Mu were such civilizations, then these artifacts may have been created by their inhabitants, which gives weight to the legends of lost knowledge. Another bolder explanation is time travel. If in the distant future, humanity or other intelligent species master time travel technologies, these artifacts could have been accidentally left behind by travelers from the future in the past. Or it could be evidence of an extraterrestrial presence. Alien civilizations that have visited Earth for millions of years may have left their tools or parts of their equipment, which were then walled up in geological layers. In this case, OOPArts are not just anomalies, but direct evidence of long-standing contacts or even colonization of the Earth by extraterrestrial entities. The challenges associated with OOPArts research are huge. Many of them have not been found in controlled archaeological excavations, which makes it difficult to accurately date them and confirm their authenticity. The scientific community is often skeptical of such findings, demanding strict adherence to the methodology and multiple independent confirmations, which unfortunately are not always enough. Some OOPArts may be fakes or misidentified natural formations. However, this does not mean that all such objects should be discarded immediately. It is necessary to apply the most modern methods of analysis, such as spectroscopy, isotope analysis, and computed tomography, in order to determine their composition, age, and manufacturing method with maximum accuracy. Independent verification and re-examination of the sites is also crucial. Thus, OOPArts and anachronistic artifacts provide powerful, if controversial, material evidence for the existence of lost eras and forgotten technologies. They are not just curiosities, but puzzles that challenge our generally accepted chronology and ideas about the past. These objects, whether ancient mechanisms, tools, or inexplicable structures, hint that the Earth's history is much richer and more complex than we usually think, and that long before us, highly developed civilizations, terrestrial or extraterrestrial, may have flourished here, whose knowledge and achievements were lost as a result of disasters or other, as yet unknown to us, events. Studying these mysterious artifacts is not just an academic interest, but also the key to rethinking our own place in the history of the universe, opening the door to new, exciting hypotheses about our origins and those who lived on this planet millions of years ago. Perhaps they are silent witnesses to the same great drama that unfolded in the distant past, and perhaps they're messages that our civilization is not the first, and we must learn from the fate of those who came before us, so as not to repeat their mistakes. Megalithic structures, the inexplicable technologies of ancient builders and their lost knowledge. After exploring mythical continents and anachronistic artifacts that point to the existence of highly advanced civilizations in ancient times, we move on to the most tangible and monumental class of evidence that challenges conventional history: giant megalithic structures scattered around the globe. From Egyptian pyramids to Peruvian terraces, from European cromlechs to Indonesian temples, these colossal structures impress with their incredible scale, amazing stone processing accuracy, and mysterious, still not fully understood construction methods. They are silent but eloquent witnesses to the existence of unexplained technologies and lost knowledge that seem to have far exceeded the capabilities of the supposed primitive societies that built them. It is these structures that most often serve as a direct argument in favor of the fact that lost civilizations possessed a skill far beyond the Stone or Bronze Ages. Let's take a look at some of the most prominent examples, each of which presents a unique engineering puzzle. The pyramids of Giza in Egypt are perhaps the most famous and majestic example. The Great Pyramid of Cheops consists of millions of stone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons and some reaching 80 tons. These blocks were mined, transported hundreds of kilometers, and raised to a height of more than 140 meters with amazing accuracy. The sides of the pyramid are oriented strictly to the cardinal directions, and its mathematical proportions are said to contain relations related to the number of pi and the golden ratio, as well as astronomical measurements. Official Egyptology explains the construction of the pyramids using millions of workers, ramps, and primitive tools. However, skeptics point to the huge logistical and engineering difficulties of this approach, especially given the accuracy of fitting blocks, where even a razor blade will not pass between them, and the speed with which the blocks were calculated to fit, one block every few minutes for decades. This leads many researchers to look for explanations in more advanced, now lost, technologies. Fast forward to South America, where we are met with equally impressive evidence. Sacsayhuaman, an Inca fortress, though possibly built by an even older civilization, near Cusco in Peru, is striking with its huge polygonal blocks, some of which weigh more than 100 tons. These blocks are perfectly fitted to each other without the use of mortar, forming a complex, earthquake-resistant masonry. Similar polygonal masonry is found in other Inca and pre-Inca structures, such as Ollantaytambo and Machu Picchu. The methods by which these giant stones were processed with such precision, carved from solid rock, and combined into such complex shapes are still unknown. Using only stone tools and manual labor seems insufficient to explain such skill. Some researchers suggest the use of unknown methods of softening or melting stone, or the use of sound technologies that can manipulate matter at the molecular level, which could be the legacy of lost highly developed civilizations, or even the direct influence of extraterrestrial beings. Another striking example is Baalbek in Lebanon. On the Baalbek Plateau are the ruins of a Roman temple complex, but beneath them lie foundations made of stones so colossal that they are known as trilithons. The 3 blocks that make up this platform weigh about 800 tons each. Nearby, in a quarry, lies another so-called Stone of the South, or Stone of the Pregnant Woman, which weighs more than 1,000 tons. This is one of the largest processed stones ever found on Earth. How could the ancient builders have extracted, transported, and lifted such massive blocks when their weight exceeds the capacity of any cranes or vehicles of the time known to us? This makes us think about the application of technologies based on principles unknown to modern engineering, perhaps such as anti-gravity or levitation using sound waves. As we mentioned in the context of archaeoacoustics, in the British Isles in Europe, we find Stonehenge and numerous megalithic cromlechs and dolmens. Although the stones of Stonehenge are not as huge as in Baalbek, their transportation over long distances and vertical installation, weighing tens of tons, remains a mystery. Many of these structures have a striking astronomical orientation, accurately tracking the solstices and equinoxes, indicating the ancient builders' deep knowledge of celestial mechanics, as well as their use as calendars, observatories, or even sophisticated navigational beacons. This mastery of astronomy may also be the legacy of highly advanced civilizations that had a deeper understanding of the cosmos. As for the construction methods that these lost civilizations might have used, in addition to the mentioned sound technologies and anti-gravity, there are hypotheses about the use of unknown chemical solutions that could soften the stone for its processing and then harden. Or it could be energy manipulation, perhaps using crystals or other minerals that could generate or focus powerful energy fields that could process and move massive objects. Some researchers suggest that the ancients may have used some sort of geopolymer technology, creating concrete from readily available materials that would then look like natural stone, but would be much easier to produce and shape. However, this theory does not always apply to monumental blocks of granite or basalt that were clearly carved from quarries. It is also important to consider the goal of these megalithic structures. Were they only temples, tombs, or observatories? Or did they perform more complex functions related to the energy nodes of the Earth, communication, or even interaction with extraterrestrial civilizations? If the lost civilizations were associated with extraterrestrials, then these structures could have been built under their direction or, with their help, serving as beacons, landing pads, or power generators for their technologies. It is possible that some knowledge is encrypted in these structures, which we still cannot decipher. The challenges facing megalith researchers are enormous. Official archaeology often underestimates engineering difficulties, explaining everything by manual labor and years of perseverance, which is not always satisfactory. There is little direct evidence of the use of advanced tools or techniques, and ancient records are extremely sparse or non-existent. However, the advent of new technologies such as 3D scanning, ground-penetrating radars to study underground structures, and experiments to move massive rocks may help solve these mysteries in the future. Research is continuing on the acoustic properties of megalithic chambers, which, as the data show, could be used to create certain sound resonances that affect consciousness or even matter itself. Thus, megalithic structures around the world are not just ancient ruins, but tangible, monumental proofs of the existence of lost technologies and knowledge. They provide irrefutable evidence that in the distant past there were civilizations on Earth whose engineering and scientific achievements were superior or comparable to ours. But for some reason, this knowledge was lost. Whether it's stone processing techniques, levitation techniques, deep knowledge of astronomy, or the ability to tap into Earth's energies, these structures are a direct challenge to our understanding of the primitiveness of ancient peoples. They make us wonder if this knowledge was the result of the independent development of lost Earth civilizations, or if it was obtained from an external, extraterrestrial source. The study of these mysterious monuments is not just an academic interest, it is the key to rethinking the entire chronology of human development, to discovering forgotten chapters of our planetary history, and perhaps to understanding why these great civilizations, capable of such amazing achievements, eventually simply disappeared, leaving only their stone riddles as the last, a silent message. Underwater cities and ancient ruins of the oceans, evidence of civilizations swallowed up by the deep. After we have explored the myths of lost continents and studied the land-based megalithic structures, whose construction technologies remain a mystery, our attention naturally turns to the water element. The oceans, which, according to numerous legends, hide in their bottomless depths the remains of once thriving cities and entire civilizations. The idea of underwater ruins swallowed up by ancient cataclysms is one of the most romantic and intriguing hypotheses in alternative archaeology. If the global floods and sea level changes that we discussed earlier really took place in the distant past, then it is logical to assume that vast coastal zones that were inhabited and developed now rest on the ocean floor, waiting to be discovered. These underwater cities and anomalies on the seafloor represent potential direct evidence of the existence of lost civilizations, whose fate was predetermined by the forces of the elements or other events that are still unknown to us. One of the most famous and hotly debated examples is the Bimini Road, discovered in 1968 off the coast of Bimini Island in the Bahamas. This is a flat line of massive limestone blocks located in shallow water, which extends for about 800 meters. Blocks, some of which have regular shapes and right angles, are laid in such a way that they resemble an ancient road, wall, or foundation of a structure. Although most geologists are inclined to consider Bimini Road a natural geological formation, the result of tectonic processes and limestone erosion, proponents of its artificial origin point to the extraordinary regularity of the block shapes and their laying, which in their opinion cannot be accidental. If it is indeed an artificial structure, then its estimated age of thousands of years since it was submerged after the last ice age indicates the existence of a developed culture in the Caribbean long before the appearance of known civilizations. If this is not just an accident, then who built this road and why? Even more impressive and mysterious is the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan. Discovered in 1986, this underwater complex is a colossal sandstone formation that resembles a stepped pyramid, giant terraces, straight walls, perfectly flat areas, and even rock-cut images, including something that looks like a human face. The size of the monument is impressive, more than 50 meters in height and about 200 meters in length. Its regular geometric shapes, strikingly clear angles and planes, as well as the presence of characteristic cuts and paths that seem too smooth for natural processes have led many researchers, including geology professor Masaki Kimura, to claim that this is an artificial structure created by an ancient civilization. If so, its estimated age of 10,000 years or more, given that it must have been above water when sea levels were lower, makes it one of the oldest monumental structures on Earth, challenging all ideas about the development of civilizations in the region. The Yonaguni controversy. They continue, but its existence continues to fuel hypotheses about lost worlds in the Pacific Ocean, such as Lemuria or Mu, which we met earlier. In addition to these two most famous sites, there are numerous lesser-known but equally intriguing reports of underwater ruins around the world. Off the coast of India, for example, the supposed ruins of the ancient city of Dwarka were discovered, which according to Indian myths was the city of the god Krishna and was swallowed up by the sea. Underwater archaeological surveys in the area have indeed revealed large stone structures, some of which have regular shapes and look like man-made formations dating back thousands of years. Although their affiliation with the mythical Dwarka remains a matter of debate, these findings confirm that extensive settlements may have been submerged in the region. In the Mediterranean, especially in the area of Greece and Italy, there are also numerous underwater ruins of ancient ports, cities, and settlements that were submerged as a result of sea level changes or tectonic activity. Although most of them belong to historical periods, their existence serves as a clear reminder that even relatively recent cities can be swallowed up by the sea, not to mention much older ones. For example, the submerged city of Pavlopetri off the coast of Laconia in Greece, dating back to the Bronze Age, is the oldest known submerged city in the world and shows how well urban structures can survive underwater. As for more ambitious hypotheses, proponents of the existence of lost continents, such as Atlantis, suggest that deep under the waters of the Atlantic Ocean may hide the remains of much larger structures. Modern oceanographic studies, although they have not found entire continents, nevertheless reveal numerous seamounts, plateaus, and canyons that could have been part of once existing islands or land bridges if sea levels were significantly lower. Some researchers point to anomalies in the bottom relief, which in their opinion are too symmetrical for natural formations, hinting at the possible presence of artificial structures. The challenges of exploring underwater cities are huge. High costs of deep-sea exploration, technical difficulties of working underwater, low visibility, strong currents, and pressure. All this makes underwater archaeology one of the most difficult areas of science. In addition, there is the problem of separating natural geological formations from artificial structures, since nature can create surprisingly regular and symmetrical shapes. Insufficient funding and skepticism in the scientific community are also slowing progress in this area. However, the development of the autonomous underwater vehicles, remote sensing, and methods of 3D modeling of the seabed opens up new horizons. These technologies allow researchers to cover vast areas of the ocean floor and identify potential anomalies that can then be studied in more detail. Thus, underwater cities and ancient ruins resting on the ocean floor are one of the most convincing, although requiring further study, classes of evidence in favor of the existence of lost civilizations. These structures, whether they are mysterious roads, step pyramids, or the foundations of ancient settlements, indicate that in the distant past, vast areas of land now hidden underwater were home to advanced societies whose achievements were wiped off the face of the earth as a result of global cataclysms. They serve as a powerful reminder that the Earth's history is not limited to land, and that beneath its waves can hide countless untold stories of the greatness and fall of ancient civilizations. Exploring these underwater mysteries isn't just an academic interest. It's the key to understanding the true scale of the planetary catastrophes that shaped our Earth, and to rethinking our own place in its incredibly long and complex record. After all, if these cities were really built by highly advanced civilizations, then their sinking is not just a tragedy, but a lesson about the fragility of human existence in the face of powerful natural forces, and perhaps their silent presence on the ocean floor holds the keys to the survival of our own civilization. Scientific skepticism and academic orthodoxy barriers to recognition of lost civilizations. As we delve into intriguing myths about lost continents, study unexplained artifacts, and marvel at grandiose megalithic structures that challenge our understanding of ancient technology. The question inevitably arises, why aren't these fascinating hypotheses about the existence of highly advanced civilizations in the distant past widely accepted by the official scientific community? The answer lies in the complex and often conservative nature of scientific skepticism and academic orthodoxy, which on the one hand are an integral part of the scientific method, ensuring the rigor and reliability of research, but on the other can act as a powerful barrier to the adoption of radically new ideas, especially those that run counter to established paradigms. This conflict between alternative history and official archaeology is at the heart of much of the Lost Worlds debate. The foundation of the modern scientific approach is based on the principles of empirical confirmation, verification, falsifiability, and reproducibility. This means that any claim must be supported by verifiable evidence before it can be accepted as fact, and the results of research must be reproduced by independent experts. In the case of lost civilizations, such as Atlantis or Lemuria, the main problems arise at this stage. Plato describes Atlantis, but direct, irrefutable archaeological evidence of its existence has not yet been found. Underwater structures like the Bimini Road or the Yonaguni Monumentare often explained as natural geological formations, as nature is able to create surprisingly symmetrical and regular shapes. Dating such objects creates additional difficulties, especially when they are underwater and their context is severely disrupted. Official archaeology and geology operate within well-defined chronological frameworks and evolutionary models. According to these models, humanity evolved gradually, from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, then to the Iron Age, and the emergence of highly developed civilizations with advanced technologies capable of building megaliths or creating OOPArts, millions or even tens of thousands of years ago, contradicts the entire accumulated knowledge base. For a scientist to accept such a hypothesis, it requires not just strange finds, but numerous, convincing, and reliably dated evidence found under controlled conditions. OOPArts, such as the hammer from London or the spheres from Klerksdorp, are often rejected because of the unclear context of the discovery. They were not found by professional archaeologists, or are criticized for possible misinterpretation. For example, as natural nodules or relatively recent objects that have fallen into ancient layers due to geological disturbances. The problem is also the lack of transitional evidence. If there were a highly developed civilization, it would have to leave behind extensive traces. Not only individual artifacts, but also entire cities, infrastructure, writing, tools, and burial sites that would demonstrate the consistent development of technology. In most cases, there is no such comprehensive evidence. Individual, disjointed finds, as intriguing as they may be, are often perceived as anomalies rather than evidence of the existence of fully fledged, lost civilizations. An important role is played by the Occam principle, or Occam's razor, which states that from several equivalent explanations, the simplest one should be chosen. For a scientist, the explanation of megaliths by primitive tools and mass labor, although it raises questions, seems more simple and less hypothetical than the assumption of the existence of unknown technologies or contacts with extraterrestrials. Hypotheses about extraterrestrial influence or time travel are considered highly speculative and go beyond the usual scientific method, requiring even more exceptional evidence. In addition, there is a psychological aspect. The academic community, like any other, is subject to inertia of thinking. Scientists invest years of their lives in studying and validating existing theories. Adopting a radically new paradigm that refutes established truths means revising a huge body of knowledge, writing new textbooks, and perhaps even admitting that previous generations of researchers were wrong. This causes natural resistance and skepticism, which is understandable. Reputations, grants, and careers depend on working within recognized theories. Another barrier is the problem of funding and access to research. Exploration of underwater objects or deep geological layers is extremely expensive and requires high-tech equipment. Funders generally prefer to support projects that have clear, measurable goals and a high probability of success within the framework of recognized theories. Hypotheses about lost civilizations are often considered pseudoscientific or fantastic, which makes it difficult to obtain funds and permits for large-scale research. However, it is important to note that scientific skepticism is not the same as total denial. A true scientific approach implies a willingness to change your point of view when there is convincing evidence. The problem is that compelling evidence for proponents of alternative theories often does not meet the strict criteria of compelling evidence for the academic community. The gap in methodologies, interpretations, and evidence requirements creates this constant conflict. Despite this, some representatives of official science show openness to new data. Progress in geoarchaeology and paleoclimatology and oceanography is constantly providing new data about past changes on the planet, about sea level rise, about ancient catastrophes, which can to some extent support ideas about the lost lands. The discovery of sites such as Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is significantly older than the supposed appearance of monumental architecture, has already forced archaeologists to reconsider the chronology of the development of civilizations. This shows that science is able to adapt and revise its views under the pressure of new, irrefutable facts. Thus, scientific skepticism and academic orthodoxy are double barriers to widespread acceptance of hypotheses about lost civilizations. These barriers are not caused by malicious intent, but by strict adherence to the scientific method, the requirement for empirical confirmation, and the conservatism inherent in any established knowledge system. The lack of direct, widely accepted, and reliably dated evidence, as well as the conflict with existing evolutionary models, makes these hypotheses difficult to prove within the current paradigm. However, with the development of new research technologies such as deep-sea scans, ground-penetrating radars, and more accurate dating methods, as well as with the appearance of more and more anomalous finds, the pressure on traditional views will increase. Perhaps in the future, when a sufficient amount of irrefutable data is accumulated, the academic world will be forced to reconsider its position and open a new, exciting chapter in the history of mankind, which still remains lost in the annals of science. This process is slow and requires patience, but it is unavoidable if we truly strive for a full understanding of our past. Ancient maps and riddles of lost cartography evidence of ice-free oceans and forgotten lands. In an effort to unravel the mystery of lost civilizations and continents, researchers turn not only to myths, archaeological finds, and geological data, but also to ancient maps and atlases, which at first glance seem to be ordinary cartographic works of the past. However, on closer inspection, some of these maps show remarkable accuracy in depicting geographical features that, according to official history, were discovered much later, or contain images of lands that are now hidden under ice or underwater. These cartographic anomalies provide a powerful, if controversial, argument that ancient civilizations had much deeper and more extensive knowledge of the planet's geography than is commonly believed, and also indicate that the Earth may have looked very different in the distant past, perhaps with now vanished continents and islands. One of the most famous and widely discussed examples is the map of Piri Reis, a Turkish admiral and cartographer compiled in 1513. This map, discovered in 1929, shows the west coast of Africa, the east coast of South America, and most surprisingly, the ice-free coast of Antarctica. Scientists have long believed that Antarctica was discovered only in 1820, and its coastline was hidden under a multi-kilometer layer of ice for millions of years. However, an analysis of the Piri Reis map conducted by Professor Hapgood and other experts showed a surprising correspondence between the coast depicted and data from seismic sounding under the ice of Antarctica. If the map really accurately depicts Antarctica without ice cover, it means that someone must have mapped it before it was covered with ice, which, according to the most conservative estimates, happened at least 6,000, 12,000 years ago, and according to some sources, much earlier. Who possessed such advanced knowledge of cartography and navigation in that distant era? This assumption directly challenges our understanding of the capabilities of ancient civilizations in the age of human geographical knowledge. If Antarctica was ice-free, it could have been habitable, perhaps home to one of the lost civilizations. Another intriguing artifact is a map of Orontius Phineus, dated 1531. This map also shows a strikingly accurate image of Antarctica, including mountain ranges and rivers that were only discovered in the 20th century with modern equipment. Moreover, it depicts Antarctica as a continent without ice cover, which again points to a source of information that existed in ancient times. The coincidence of these two maps in the image of ice-free Antarctica is extremely interesting and raises serious questions about the primary sources that medieval cartographers relied on. Perhaps they used more ancient maps that have not come down to us, but which were compiled by highly developed, now extinct civilizations capable of conducting global cartographic research. In addition to the polar regions, there are other maps that contain anomalies. For example, some Old World maps, such as the Haji Ahmed map 1559, depicts the supposed continent of Lemuria in the Pacific Ocean, with outlines that cannot be explained by the discoveries known at that time. Also, various medieval maps sometimes contain references or schematic representations of lands that, according to legends, were submerged, for example, island groups that now rest on the bottom of the Atlantic. Although these images may only be the result of cartographers' imagination, their repetitiveness and detail sometimes make us think about their possible real basis. How could ancient civilizations have obtained such accurate geographical data? If we assume that lost civilizations, such as Atlantis, existed and were highly developed, then they probably possessed technologies that allowed for long-distance sea travel and even air or space flights. Making such accurate maps would require geodesy techniques that we are used to associating with modern technologies, such as satellite imagery or aerial photography. If the ancients possessed flying machines, as some myths say, for example, vimanas in Indian texts, then they could conduct global mapping from the air. This could explain why ancient maps may have been more accurate than maps from later eras when these technologies were lost. However, it is necessary to take into account the skeptical point of view on these cartographic anomalies. Critics claim that the apparent accuracy of the Piri Reis map may be the result of random coincidences, interpretation, or even falsification. The image of Antarctica may be nothing more than a schematic representation of the southern continent, which was assumed by the ancients, or it may be part of South America, located in such a way as to create the illusion of a separate continent. In addition, the process of dating maps and their primary sources is complex, and it is often impossible to determine exactly which source data was used. Geological data on the time when Antarctica was ice-free differ, and some scientists believe that this happened much earlier than 12,000 years ago, which complicates interpretation. However, even if these maps are not literal proofs of the existence of ancient flying machines, they definitely indicate the presence of lost geographical knowledge in antiquity. Perhaps this knowledge was passed on by word of mouth or through secret societies, and then got to the cartographers of the Middle Ages, who included it in their work, not fully understanding their origin. Or they are evidence of the existence of some Hyperborean or Atlantean centers of knowledge that were able to preserve and transmit information through millennia. Ongoing research on ancient maps includes not only their physical analysis, but also the use of computer programs for georeferencing in comparison with modern satellite data, which allows us to more accurately assess their cartographic accuracy. Studying the composition of paper, ink, and pigments, as well as analyzing handwriting and style, helps determine the age and authenticity of documents. These techniques can help separate genuine anomalies from coincidences or late distortions. Thus, ancient maps and the mysteries of lost cartography provide an intriguing body of evidence that, if properly interpreted, can significantly expand our understanding of lost civilizations. They suggest that people, or other intelligent beings in ancient times, had much more extensive geographical knowledge and mapping technologies than is commonly believed. Perhaps this knowledge was derived from previous, now extinct, civilizations that had the means to explore the planet globally, whether by sea or by air. These maps, if they truly reflect reality, serve as silent but compelling evidence that the world we know once looked different, and that its surface was home to highly developed societies whose achievements and tragic disappearance still remain one of Earth's greatest unsolved mysteries. The study of these maps is not just an academic task, it is an attempt to recover lost knowledge about our world and those who lived here before us. And perhaps this knowledge holds the keys to understanding why some civilizations disappeared and others continued their development. Genetic anomalies and mysteries of human origin, echoes of forgotten interventions and ancient hybrids. As we search for answers to questions about lost civilizations and continents that simply disappeared, we can't ignore one of the most fundamental and profound mysteries facing modern science: humanity's own origins and unexplained anomalies in our genetic code. The official evolutionary theory paints a picture of the gradual and linear evolution of Homo sapiens from primitive hominids, but there are many questions that it cannot fully answer. These unexplained gaps and leaps in evolution, especially in the development of our brain and cognitive abilities, as well as some unique genetic features, can serve as indirect but intriguing evidence that our appearance was not exclusively a natural process, but perhaps due to external intervention or the existence of previous genetically developed ones. But now extinct civilizations. If Atlantis, Lemuria, or other pre-civilizations did exist, their populations probably possess genetic or biological characteristics different from those we attribute to the primitive people of their era. One of the most frequently mentioned paradoxes is the so-called missing link, or more precisely, the sudden and disproportionately rapid growth of the human brain. Over millions of years, our ancestors evolved slowly, but around 200–300,000 years ago, and then especially around 70–50,000 years ago, there was a sharp jump in the size and complexity of the brain, which led to the emergence of modern cognitive abilities, language, abstract thinking, and art. This jump seems abnormally fast compared to the normal rate of evolution. If there was no clear evolutionary pressure to explain such rapid development, the question arises: what could have been the catalyst? Some proponents of alternative theories suggest that this may have been the result of targeted genetic intervention by more advanced beings, possibly aliens, who manipulated the DNA of our ancestors to accelerate their development, creating, in effect, a hybrid. This hypothesis finds echoes in ancient myths, where gods create a person in their own image or give him intelligence and knowledge. In addition, there are unique human genetic traits that distinguish us from other primates and are difficult to explain by natural selection alone. For example, the relatively short gestation period compared to other primates, as well as the high vulnerability of the human calf at birth, which requires a long period of care and training. Some researchers also point out the presence of certain genetic junk sequences, so-called dark DNA, which in their opinion may contain inactive but potentially significant regions that could be part of a more complex genetic code inherent in our predecessors or those who may have constructed us. If ancient civilizations had advanced medical and genetic knowledge, they might have experimented with their own genome or that of other species. Another mystery is related to the Rh-negative blood factor, Rh-negative. Most people have Rh-positive blood, but approximately 15% of the world's population has Rh-negative blood. This feature causes incompatibility during pregnancy when a Rh-negative mother is carrying a Rh-positive child, which requires medical intervention. Proponents of alternative hypotheses believe that the Rh-negative factor may be not just a genetic mutation, but a legacy from another, unearthly or more ancient race that was different from the mainstream of human evolution. This blood, in their opinion, could be part of the genetic pool of lost civilizations, whose descendants live among us today, carrying these unique markers. Paleoanthropological findings also sometimes call into question the linearity of evolution. The discovery of ancient hominids that possessed amazing abilities, for example, Homo naledi with its complex burial rituals, or coexisted with modern humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, points to a more complex and diverse picture of our past. If we consider the theory of lost civilizations, we can assume that these side branches of evolution could be associated with experiments or various lines of development, which then disappeared, leaving only fragmentary evidence. Perhaps some of these species were associated with lost civilizations, being their ancestors or even creatures. The concept of seeds of civilization, or genetic memory, is also part of these hypotheses. If there were highly developed civilizations that were destroyed by cataclysms, then some of their knowledge could be passed on to the survivors in a hidden form, through genetic memory, archetypes of the collective unconscious, or even through direct instructions from teachers who survived the catastrophe. This could explain why certain knowledge and symbols appear independently in different cultures, as well as why some people show unusual abilities or intuitive understanding of complex concepts. The challenges in investigating genetic anomalies and their connection to lost civilizations are enormous. Official genetics and biology do not find evidence of alien or sudden interference in the human genome, explaining all mutations and changes by natural processes. Interpretation of genetic data is very complex, and many anomalies can be explained by rare mutations or simply by aspects of the genome that are not yet fully understood. However, with the development of technologies such as DNA sequencing and paleogenetics, we are getting more and more information about ancient populations and their migrations, which can either confirm or refute some of these bold hypotheses. Studies of ancient DNA extracted from the remains may reveal previously unknown connections between different groups of people and point to their possible common ancestry from now extinct populations. Thus, genetic anomalies and the mysteries of human origins represent another deeply intriguing aspect in the search for lost civilizations. If Atlantis, Lemuria, if other advanced societies actually existed, then their heritage could be not only architectural or technological, but also biological, imprinted in the very genetic code of modern man. Hypotheses about sudden leaps in brain evolution, unique genetic traits, and the possibility of ancient genetic interventions, while highly speculative, nevertheless make us think about the more complex and non-linear history of our species. They offer the bold but not impossible possibility that we ourselves, Homo sapiens, carry echoes of those very forgotten worlds, and that our appearance on Earth may have been connected with the activities of those who lived here before us, and who then simply disappeared, leaving us with this great mystery of our own existence. Understanding these genetic mysteries may be the key to unlocking the full truth about lost civilizations and our true place in cosmic and planetary history. The mystery of the Sahara Desert, from blooming savannas to lifeless sands that hide ancient secrets. As we continue our dive into the world of lost civilizations, we will turn to one of the most striking examples of climate change, which could not only destroy thriving cultures but also clearly demonstrate how vast regions of the planet can turn from gardens of paradise to lifeless deserts, hiding the traces of once great societies under layers of sand. We will talk about the Sahara Desert, which today is the largest hot desert in the world, but in ancient times was quite different. A blooming savanna permeated by rivers and lakes, rich in flora and fauna, and quite possibly a cradle or transit zone for unknown civilizations. If Atlantis and Mu are buried underwater, the Sahara may be hiding its secrets under the sand, being a kind of lost continent on land. Archaeological and geological evidence strongly suggests that the Sahara was not always a desert. During the so-called green period of the Sahara, or African wet period, which lasted from about 10,500 to 5,500 years ago, the climate in North Africa was significantly wetter than it is today. Monsoon rains reached much more northerly latitudes, creating vast lakes, rivers, and swamps. This was the period when the Sahara was covered with lush grasslands and savannas, which were home to elephants, giraffes, antelopes, hippos, and crocodiles. This is confirmed by numerous finds of rock carvings and petroglyphs found in various parts of the Sahara, for example, in Tasselin Ager in Algeria or Fezzan in Libya. These images vividly demonstrate life in the savanna, hunting wild animals, scenes of cattle breeding, and even ritual dances, which indicates the existence of thriving human communities. The presence of such a favorable climate created ideal conditions for the development of prehistoric cultures, evidence of the existence of fishing and agricultural communities that led a sedentary lifestyle was found. The question is how developed these societies were. Could they have reached a level that we might call civilization, in a sense comparable to the early known civilizations of the Middle East? If so, what were their achievements? And why did they disappear so completely, leaving only ghostly images on the rocks and scattered artifacts? The key point is the drastic and relatively rapid climate change in the Sahara, which occurred about 5,500 years ago. Within just a few centuries or even decades, the region began to rapidly dry up, turning into the desert that we know today. The reason for this change, scientists believe, was a gradual change in the Earth's orbit around the Sun and the tilt of its axis, which affected the monsoon rains. As the monsoon moved south, the Sahara lost its source of moisture and vegetation began to die. Animals migrated or died, followed by humans. This transformation of vast, fertile land into a lifeless expanse is a clear example of how climate change can completely wipe out thriving regions and their inhabitants, without leaving behind grand megaliths or underwater cities. However, some researchers suggest that something more is hidden behind the disappearance of the Green Sahara. Could more advanced civilizations have used this region as a sort of transit point or colony? There are mysterious structures discovered in the desert that some consider potential evidence of ancient, now lost architecture. For example, the Eye of the Sahara, or the Rachai structure in Mauritania, is a giant geological formation with a diameter of about 50 kilometers, consisting of concentric circles. Although most geologists consider it a natural phenomenon, dome erosion, some proponents of alternative theories see it as similar to Plato's description of Atlantis, especially its ring-shaped capital structure. While this is a bold hypothesis, it demonstrates how desert landscapes can hide structures whose origins remain a matter of debate. In addition, in the Sahara, especially in its remote and poorly studied areas, artifacts are periodically discovered that do not fully correspond to the generally accepted ideas about the prehistoric cultures of the region. These may include finely crafted stone tools, unusual ceramic items, or even elements that some believe may indicate a more complex social organization and technology than expected. These findings, if interpreted correctly, may be tiny fragments left over from more advanced societies that were forced to migrate or disappeared completely when the desert swallowed up their lands. The issue of migration routes is also important. When the Sahara began to dry up, its inhabitants undoubtedly moved to more favorable regions, such as the Nile Valley. This could be a powerful impetus for the development of Egyptian civilization. Perhaps the survivors of the Green Sahara brought with them the knowledge and technology that became the basis for the subsequent flourishing of great cultures in other parts of North Africa and the Middle East. This theory implies that the Egyptians and Sumerians were not the first civilizations, but only the heirs or descendants of much older, now extinct cultures. The challenges in exploring the Sahara are enormous. Vast territories, extreme climatic conditions, sandstorms, and lack of infrastructure make archaeological research extremely difficult and expensive. Many potential excavation sites are buried under deep layers of sand, which requires the use of ground-penetrating radars and other non-invasive technologies to detect them. In addition, official archaeology often underestimates the region's potential for discovering traces of highly developed cultures, focusing on more obvious sites. Thus, in the Sahara Desert, this is not just a lifeless landscape, but a vast, little-studied archive of planetary history that may hold clues to understanding lost civilizations. Its transformation from a blooming savanna to a desert is a prime example of how climate change can cause thriving societies to disappear altogether, leaving behind no monumental ruins that could challenge our understanding of antiquity. Perhaps under its golden sands lie the remains of cities and settlements whose inhabitants were forced to leave their homes or died as a result of an environmental disaster. Exploring the Sahara is not only a search for traces of ancient cultures, but also an important reminder of the fragility of human existence in the face of planetary change. Perhaps in its desiccated expanses, we will find not only artifacts, but also lessons about how civilizations adapt to disasters or disappear, which is invaluable information for our own modern world, facing global climate change. This Earth holds stories not only about lost worlds, but also about the cyclical nature of planetary transformations that shape the destinies of civilizations over and over again. Anomalies in archaeology and ancient mysteries of South America, traces of unknown civilizations in the Andes and Amazon. Continuing our comprehensive exploration of lost civilizations and continents, we are transported to one of the most mysterious and least explored continents in the world, South America. Known for its majestic Andes Mountains, impenetrable Amazon jungles, and ancient cultures such as the Incas, Mayans, and Aztecs, although the latter two are predominantly Central American. This continent harbors a host of archaeological anomalies that go beyond conventional chronology and make one wonder about the existence of much older and more advanced civilizations whose traces may have been erased over time, cataclysms, or hidden by dense vegetation. South America, with its extreme landscapes from high mountain plateaus to vast rainforests, is the perfect place to preserve the secrets of the past waiting to be discovered. One of the most striking examples, which we have already partially addressed in the context of megaliths, is Tiwanaku in Bolivia, located at an altitude of almost 4,000 meters above sea level. This ancient city, which predates the Incas, impresses with its huge, perfectly crafted stone blocks, some of which weigh tens of tons. Gate of the Sun, Pumapunku. These structures demonstrate not only amazing precision processing of andesite and diorite, stones that are incredibly difficult to cut and polish even with modern tools, but also complex engineering solutions, including lock, joints, and perfectly fitted blocks. Official archaeology dates Tiwanaku to around 1500 BC, but proponents of alternative theories, such as Arthur Posnansky, who has devoted decades to studying the site, argue that astronomical alignments point to a much older date, about 17,000 years ago. If Tiwanaku really was built at such a distant time, it completely changes the idea of the development of civilizations in South America and indicates the existence of a highly developed culture during the last ice age, when the Andes were very different. The methods used to move and process these colossal stones remain one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Another intriguing anomaly is the Nazca lines in Peru. These giant geoglyphs, depicting animals, plants, and geometric shapes, stretch for kilometers across the desert plateau. They were created by removing dark rocks from the surface to expose the lighter soil beneath. Why and by whom were these giant drawings created, which are completely visible only from a great height? Official theories suggest their ritual or astronomical purpose, but they cannot explain how ancient people could have created such accurate and large-scale images without being able to see them entirely from Earth. Proponents of alternative theories see them as evidence of ballooning in ancient times, possibly using balloons or other flying vehicles that may have belonged to now-lost civilizations, or even extraterrestrial visitors. If the ancient Incas or their predecessors possessed such technology, this indicates an incredible level of their development. Traveling deeper into the Amazon jungle, we encounter an even more fundamental problem. Its impassability and dense vegetation hide huge, potentially unidentified, archaeological complexes. For a long time, the Amazon was considered relatively uninhabited or home to primitive nomadic tribes. However, current research using LiDAR, laser scanning technology that can penetrate dense foliage, is beginning to reveal striking evidence of vast, complex settlements, giant geoglyphs, road networks, and agricultural systems built thousands of years ago. Some of these structures, such as geoglyphy, the acre geoglyphs in Brazil, have surprisingly regular geometric shapes and stretch for kilometers. These findings indicate that the Amazon was home to far more numerous and developed societies in ancient times than we thought, perhaps even to city-states that flourished in the pre-Columbian era and then disappeared due to disease, war, or environmental disasters, leaving only hidden ruins under the canopy of the forest. Perhaps these civilizations had the knowledge and technology that allowed them to survive and thrive in the jungle, without leaving the usual monumental stone structures that we find in other places. In addition, in South America, there are mysteries associated with ancient metallurgical technologies. For example, the finds in Colombia, such as the golden figures resembling airplane that we have already mentioned in the context of OOPArts, and the use of platinum in the pre-Columbian period, which requires very high temperatures to process. This raises questions about how ancient craftsmen could have reached such temperatures and processed such complex metals without visible evidence of advanced furnaces or tools. Could this knowledge have been inherited from older, lost civilizations, or even from an external source? The myths of the indigenous peoples of South America are also replete with stories of lost cities, golden empires, and human gods who came from across the sea or from the heavens, bringing knowledge and civilization. These traditions, often passed down from generation to generation, can be distorted memories of the most ancient, highly developed cultures that then disappeared, leaving behind only myths and difficult-to-explain ruins. For example, the legend of Paititi, the lost city of gold in the Amazon, continues to excite the minds of explorers and adventurers. The challenges in studying the archaeological anomalies of South America are enormous. Impassability of territories, political instability in some regions, lack of funding, and of course the strict skepticism of the academic community create significant obstacles. Many of the finds were not properly documented or looted. Nevertheless, each new season of research using modern technologies brings more and more new discoveries that gradually fill in the gaps in our chronology and force us to reconsider our established views. The importance of preserving and exploring these sites is enormous, as they are invaluable archives of human history. Thus, anomalies in the archaeology of South America, they are powerful evidence that this continent was home to unknown, possibly highly developed civilizations, whose traces were erased or hidden by time and nature. From the astounding megaliths of Tiwanaku to the mysterious Nazca lines and vast hidden cities of the Amazon, this evidence challenges our understanding of human history and technological development. They make us wonder if these civilizations were the direct forerunners of the cultures we know, or if they were a completely different branch of development that reached its peak and then simply disappeared, leaving only these silent riddles waiting to be solved. The answers hidden in the jungles and high mountains of South America can fundamentally change our understanding of the ancient world and what it means to be civilized. The lost technologies of antiquity, from Vimanas to crystal energy, what did our predecessors know? After looking at the material evidence, such as megaliths and anachronistic artifacts, as well as myths about lost continents and cyclical cataclysms, the question inevitably arises. If these civilizations really existed and were highly developed, then what technologies could they have possessed? Conventional history holds that technology evolved linearly, from primitive to complex, but numerous mysteries and anomalies hint at the existence of lost or forgotten knowledge and devices that were far ahead of their time and could be comparable to, or even superior to, modern technology. The exploration of these lost technologies is one of the most exciting avenues in the search for evidence of long-vanished civilizations. If these ancient peoples simply disappeared, then what happened to their technology? Perhaps some of them were irretrievably lost. Others were preserved only in the form of myths, and still others were buried under the ground or water. One of the most well-known and widely discussed concepts is Vimanas, flying vehicles described in detail in ancient Indian texts, such as the Vimanika Shastran, the Mahabharata. In these texts, Vimanas are described as complex machines that can fly in the atmosphere and even in space, as well as move underwater and between dimensions. They could be powered by various types of energy, including mercury thrusters or anti-gravity devices. Although official science refers to these descriptions as mythology and fantasy, proponents of alternative theories see in them real evidence of the existence of ancient aviation, possibly belonging to the Atlanteans, Lemurians, or other highly developed civilization. If these descriptions are based on reality, then this fundamentally changes our understanding of the technological capabilities of the ancient world and explains how ancient cartographers could create maps like the Piri Reis map, or how Nazca lines were created that are only visible from a height. Another intriguing area is the use of crystals as an energy source or for other technological purposes. Many esoteric teachings and legends about Atlantis speak of power crystals or great crystals that could accumulate, amplify, and direct energy. Edgar Cayce, the famous American prophet, described Atlantis in detail in his Readings, where crystals were allegedly used for energy production, climate control, treatment of diseases, and even for communication. Modern science recognizes the pyroelectric and piezoelectric properties of some crystals, the ability to generate electricity under pressure or when heated, but the large-scale use of them as the main source of energy remains in the realm of science fiction. However, if ancient civilizations had a deeper understanding of physics and energy fields, they could have developed technologies that we are just beginning to master. Megalithic structures may have incorporated crystals in their designs to enhance their functions, as we discussed earlier. In addition to flying machines and crystals, the legends hint at other lost technologies. This could be sound technologies that can affect matter, which could be used to process and move giant stones during the construction of megaliths. Some studies show that certain frequencies of sound can cause levitation or alter the properties of materials. If the ancients possessed this knowledge, then many of the mysteries of pyramid construction and other monumental structures could be explained. There are also assumptions about advanced medical knowledge and technology. In ancient texts, there are descriptions of amazing methods of treatment, surgical operations, and life expectancy that seemed impossible for that time. Some researchers suggest that ancient civilizations may have possessed knowledge about nanotechnology, genetic engineering, or other forms of advanced medicine that may have been lost as a result of cataclysms. If the Atlanteans and Lemurians really did achieve a high degree of physical and spiritual development, their medical practices may have been significantly superior to ours. The question of free energy or zero energy is also often raised in the context of lost technologies. Some theories suggest that ancient civilizations may have used some inexhaustible source of energy available from the environment, possibly related to Earth's magnetic fields or cosmic energies. If such a technology existed, it could provide limitless resources for a civilization to thrive and develop technologically, but its loss could lead to a complete collapse after a catastrophe. The challenges in proving the existence of these lost technologies are enormous. Most of the evidence is indirect myths, vague descriptions, or anomalous artifacts whose purpose is not always clear. No direct working samples of ancient high-tech devices have been found. In addition, the skepticism of the scientific community towards such theories is very high, since they contradict all existing ideas about the development of technologies. However, as modern science itself makes more and more breakthroughs in areas such as quantum physics, materials research, and energy technology, perhaps we are beginning to gain a better understanding of what our distant predecessors may have known and used. For example, the discovery of the properties of graphene or the development of thermonuclear fusion can give us clues about what principles may have underpinned ancient, now lost technologies. Thus, the lost technologies of antiquity, this is not just a fantasy, but an intriguing aspect in the study of extinct civilizations. Ideas about vimanas, crystal power generators, sound instruments for construction, and advanced medical knowledge, while still largely hypothetical, nevertheless force us to rethink the limits of what is possible in the distant past. If these technologies really existed, then their loss explains why great civilizations may have disappeared almost without a trace, and also why we, after thousands of years, are beginning to rediscover some of the principles that may have been commonplace for our predecessors. The search for this lost knowledge is not only an attempt to understand the past, but also, perhaps, the key to our own future, to solving modern problems of energy, medicine, and transport, based on the wisdom of those who lived on this planet before us and whose achievements were, for some reason, erased from the collective memory. Humanity. Secret societies and guardians of ancient knowledge, who preserve the wisdom of bygone eras. As we delve deeper into the mysteries of lost civilizations and their lost technologies, the question inevitably arises. If these great societies existed and possessed amazing knowledge, could that knowledge have completely disappeared without a trace? Or perhaps some of this wisdom was preserved and passed down through the generations, protected from oblivion and misunderstanding? This idea leads us to the concept of secret societies and esoteric traditions, which, according to some theories, acted as custodians of ancient knowledge obtained from survivors of lost civilizations or even from extraterrestrial sources. These societies, often shrouded in mysticism and conspiracy theories, could become invisible threads linking our present with the distant past. Human history is replete with references to fraternities, orders, and mystery schools whose activities are shrouded in mystery. From the ancient Egyptian priests who kept their knowledge of the stars in the afterlife, to the Greek Pythagoreans who studied mathematics and cosmology in secret, from the Gnostic sects to the medieval Templars and Rosicrucians, to the modern Masonic lodges, all of them, in one way or another, claimed access to some higher or primordial power. Wisdom passed down the chain from distant ancestors, If Atlantis or other highly advanced civilizations really existed, then it is logical to assume that at the time of the disaster, a small group of survivors with knowledge and technology could have tried to preserve them for future generations. These survivors could become teachers for primitive peoples, passing on bits of lost wisdom, or they could form secret societies that would protect this knowledge from distortion and misuse. One of the most striking examples in the context of lost civilizations is the story of the Egyptian priests, described by Plato in his dialogues on Atlantis. Solon, a Greek sage, received information about Atlantis from priests in the city of Sais, who claimed that their temple archives preserved this history for thousands of years, while the Greeks lost their knowledge due to cataclysms. This indicates the existence of ancient libraries and schools that purposefully stored and transmitted information, possibly not only about their own history, but also about previous civilizations. The wisdom of the Egyptian priests, their knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and medicine, which sometimes seems abnormally advanced for their time, may have been partly inherited from an older, now lost source. In Eastern traditions, especially in Buddhism and Hinduism, there are legends about Shambhala and Agartha's secret underground or hidden cities inhabited by great teachers, guardians of ancient knowledge and technology. These legends are often associated with Hyperborea, suggesting that the inhabitants of this polar continent did not die, but went to underground shelters, continuing their existence away from the destructive forces on the surface. The search for these hidden worlds and their inhabitants is a central theme in some esoteric and theosophical teachings. If these places exist, they may be repositories not only of ancient scrolls and artifacts, but also of living carriers of lost wisdom. The Theosophical Society, founded by Helena Blavatsky, made a huge contribution to popularizing the idea of ancient, extinct civilizations such as Lemuria and Atlantis. Blavatsky claimed to have received information about the indigenous races and their history from ascended masters, or Mahatmas, who are the custodians of esoteric knowledge transmitted through secret channels. Although her teachings are often considered pseudoscientific, they have nevertheless influenced many researchers and continue to inspire the search for lost worlds. These teachings suggest that not all knowledge has been lost, but only hidden from the general public until humanity is ready to accept it. Masonic and Rosicrucian traditions also frequently mention lost secrets and symbolism associated with ancient builders and architects. Their rituals and symbols, according to some researchers, may contain encrypted knowledge about the methods of building megaliths or other aspects of ancient technology. If these organizations are indeed descendants of ancient fraternities, then their archives or oral traditions may contain bits of information about lost civilizations. The challenges associated with the study of secret societies as custodians of ancient knowledge are numerous. First, their nature is, by definition, secret, which makes verifying information extremely difficult. Many statements may be the result of hoaxes, symbolism, or simply misinterpretation. Separating real historical facts from the myths and legends transmitted within such societies is a difficult task. In addition, conspiracy theories are often viewed with skepticism, which makes them difficult for serious academic study. However, we should not completely dismiss the possibility that some of the knowledge may have actually been transmitted through certain groups of people. During periods of chaos, war, or natural disasters, when vast libraries and cultural centers were destroyed, it was small, isolated groups that could become the only carriers of certain information. Perhaps this knowledge was presented not in the form of direct scientific texts, but in the form of symbols, allegories, rituals, or oral traditions that required a special key to decipher. Thus, secret societies and guardians of ancient knowledge, they represent another, less tangible, but no less important aspect in the search for lost civilizations. If Atlantis and the other great worlds really disappeared, then the idea that their wisdom was completely lost may be wrong. Perhaps through esoteric traditions, mystical orders, and tales of hidden cities, fragments of this ancient wisdom have come down to the present day, waiting for those who can interpret and use them correctly. Exploring these invisible connections to the past is not just an attempt to solve a mystery, but also an awareness that human history is much more complex than we used to think, and that knowledge can be conveyed in ways that go beyond the usual academic framework. Perhaps these hidden teachings are part of the answer to the question of why great civilizations simply disappeared and how we can avoid their fate. Pre-Columbian contacts and transoceanic crossings. Could ancient navigators have crossed the oceans? After delving into the myths of lost continents, analyzing archaeological anomalies, and considering the idea of the guardians of ancient knowledge, we inevitably come to the question of the possibility of pre-Columbian contacts and transoceanic crossings. If there were highly developed ancient civilizations that possessed advanced technologies, as we assumed, then it is logical to assume that their ability to navigate could significantly exceed what is generally considered possible for primitive societies. The idea that ancient navigators might have regularly crossed the oceans, linking continents long before Columbus, is not just an academic debate, but also a potential explanation for the striking cultural, architectural, and even genetic similarities between peoples separated by thousands of kilometers of water. If the lost civilizations really disappeared, perhaps their last survivors or colonies spread their knowledge around the world, leaving a trail in the form of these inexplicable coincidences. Official history attributes the first transoceanic voyages to Europeans dating back to the Age of Discovery. However, there is a wealth of evidence, legends, and archaeological finds that challenge this established paradigm. Let's look at the most intriguing of them. Let's start with the striking similarities between the cultures of the Old and New World. For example, pyramid motifs are found not only in Egypt and Mesopotamia, but also among the Mayans, Aztecs, and Incas in America. Although the forms and purposes may differ, the very fact of building such grandiose and time-consuming structures in two separate worlds raises questions. Cults of solar deities, sophisticated astronomical knowledge, the use of calendars, the concept of a worldwide flood, and certain symbols such as the cross or snake appear in the mythology and art of various peoples around the world, seemingly independently of each other. Could this be the result of a common source of knowledge passed down by ancient navigators or survivors from lost civilizations? The concept of diffusionism, which asserts that cultural innovation spreads from one center to another, is often rejected in favor of independent inventiveness. However, when it comes to complex technologies or ideas, parallel, independent invention seems less likely than cultural contact. If, for example, the ancient Egyptians or Phoenicians, or their predecessors, could reach the shores of America, they could bring with them elements of their own culture, which then transformed. Let's move on to the archaeological evidence. In South America, mummies were found with traces of cocaine and nicotine, substances endemic to the New World. These findings in Egyptian mummies, such as that of Ramesses II, suggest that contact between the continents may have occurred long before Columbus. Although some scientists attribute this to contamination of the samples or later contacts, these data remain an intriguing anomaly. Also found in the Americas are artifacts such as Roman coins and prehistoric metalwork, which some believe may be evidence of ancient European or African visits. Legends of various peoples also point to transoceanic contacts. Polynesians, known for their incredible navigation skills, have settled the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean, making thousands of kilometers of sailing in their canoes. Their myths speak of distant lands and ancestors who came from beyond the horizon. In South America, among the Incas and other peoples, there are legends of bearded white gods such as Viracocha, who came from across the sea and brought civilization. These legends may be distorted memories of contacts with people from other cultures, perhaps from those same lost civilizations. But by what means could such journeys have been accomplished? If Atlantis existed, then its inhabitants, according to Plato, were a powerful sea power. Their ships may have been much more sophisticated than those we know of from the historical period. They may have used advanced navigation techniques such as astronomical navigation, knowledge of ocean currents, and even some lost technology that allowed them to travel vast distances. Experiments such as Thor Heyerdahl's Kon-Tiki raft voyage from South America to Polynesia prove that even primitive vessels could traverse the oceans, suggesting that the more advanced ships of antiquity could do so with much greater ease. There is also a hypothesis about the existence of ancient sea routes and steppe islands, which are now flooded. If sea levels were lower in the distant past, as we discussed in the context of global floods, then there may have been island chains between continents that made it easier to cross. The loss of these islands could have made transoceanic travel much more difficult or impossible, and knowledge about them was lost. The challenges in proving pre-Columbian contacts are significant. Many archaeological finds have been criticized for unreliable dating or the possibility of modern contamination. Skeptics demand hard evidence, such as large settlements, technology exchanges, or genetic traces that could support mass migrations or regular contact. However, with the development of disciplines such as genetic archaeology, which analyzes the DNA of ancient populations, we are getting more and more information about the migration routes of humanity. New data already show that ancient migrations were much more complex and extensive than previously thought. For example, genetic studies have confirmed a link between Polynesians and indigenous peoples of South America, indicating transoceanic contacts in the Pacific. Thus, pre-Columbian contacts and transoceanic crossings are an intriguing aspect in the puzzle of lost civilizations. The idea that ancient navigators may have crossed oceans, linking continents long before official discoveries, is a powerful explanation for cultural similarities, archaeological anomalies, and myths about teachers who came from the sea. If Atlantis, Lemuria, or other highly advanced civilizations really existed, then their ships might have been much more advanced and their knowledge of the world much more extensive. The disappearance of these civilizations could lead to the collapse of these ancient sea routes and the loss of knowledge about global navigation, which plunged the world into an era of isolation that ended only with great geographical discoveries. Exploring these ancient connections is not just an attempt to rewrite history, it's an awareness that the world was much more interconnected in the distant past than we could have imagined, and that our predecessors had abilities that we are just beginning to rediscover. Perhaps the keys to unraveling the fate of lost civilizations lie not only in their ruins, but also in the memory of those who, fleeing from death, spread their knowledge and culture around the globe. Ancient mysteries of Africa, forgotten kingdoms, unexplained structures, and the origins of civilization. As we continue our exploration of lost civilizations, we are now on our way to Africa, the cradle of humanity and a continent whose ancient secrets remain largely unsolved. In addition to the well-known Egyptian pyramids, which we have already discussed in the context of megalithic technologies, Africa hides many other archaeological anomalies. Myths about lost cities and evidence of highly developed cultures whose history may have been erased by time and sand. This continent, with its incredible variety of landscapes, from deserts to rainforests, from high mountains to vast savannas, is a rich source of mysteries that challenge our understanding of the origins of civilization and its spread. One of the most intriguing examples is the kimberlite pipe in South Africa, where the so-called metal spheres from Klerksdorp, which we mentioned in the chapter on OOPArts, were discovered in the early 20th century. If their age of 2.8 billion years and artificial origin are proven, it will completely change not only the history of mankind, but also the history of life on Earth. Although academic science considers them natural nodules, their perfect spherical shape and the presence of grooves continue to cause controversy. This is just one example of how the oldest geological strata in Africa may hold clues to understanding prehistoric, highly advanced civilizations. Moving north to ancient Egypt, we are once again confronted with questions about the origins of their incredible knowledge. Although the Egyptian civilization is considered one of the oldest and most studied, many aspects of its achievements remain unexplained. In addition to building pyramids with amazing precision, questions arise about stone processing technologies, medical knowledge, including complex operations and mummification, and their deep astronomical knowledge. Theories that the Egyptians may have been heirs or descendants of survivors from Atlantis, as Plato pointed out through Egyptian priests, or that they received knowledge from other, more ancient sources, continue to stir minds. For example, the Western Egyptian desert contains numerous traces of ancient lakes and rivers, which is consistent with the idea of a green Sahara and the possible existence of older, submerged or buried settlements that may have been the forerunners of Egyptian civilization. One of the least studied but potentially very significant regions is East Africa and the Great Rift Valley. This region is considered the cradle of humanity, where the oldest remains of hominids were found. However, if we assume the existence of more ancient, highly developed civilizations, then it is here, in geologically active and changeable landscapes, that the earliest and most destroyed traces could be hidden. Some researchers suggest that the myths about starmen or teachers from heaven that are found in many African tribes may be echoes of contacts with highly developed beings, perhaps from previous terrestrial civilizations or even extraterrestrial ones. In South Africa, there is another intriguing mystery, Adam's Circles, or Adam's Calendar, near the town of Barberton. This is a cluster of ancient megalithic structures arranged in a circle, some of which, according to researcher Michael Tellinger, could have been part of a complex ancient power grid or astronomical observatory. The age of these structures is estimated at tens or even hundreds of thousands of years, making them one of the oldest man-made objects on Earth, thousands of years ahead of any known megalith. If these dates are correct, then this indicates the existence of a developed culture in South Africa in ancient times. Long before the appearance of modern man, Tellinger suggests that these structures may have been used to mine gold or generate some form of energy. In Central and West Africa, dense rainforests can also hide unsolved mysteries. The impassability of the jungle makes archaeological research there extremely difficult. However, local tribal legends speak of lost cities and kingdoms that were swallowed up by the forest or disappeared as a result of unknown disasters. These oral traditions may contain echoes of real events in the existence of ancient, now forgotten, African civilizations whose cities were built from short-lived materials such as wood and clay, and therefore did not survive to this day in the form of grandiose ruins like the stone structures of Egypt or South America. Using LiDAR and other remote sensing technologies, as is done in the Amazon, could help detect these hidden structures. The mythology of many African peoples, such as the Dogon of Mali, who have an astounding astronomical knowledge of the star Sirius and its moons, which are impossible to observe with the naked eye and were discovered by modern astronomy only in the 20th century, is also a source of questions. How did a tribe living in isolation have such precise knowledge? Proponents of alternative theories suggest that this knowledge could have been inherited from more ancient, highly developed civilizations or obtained from extraterrestrial contacts. The challenges facing researchers in ancient Africa are enormous. Many regions are politically unstable or inaccessible. Climatic conditions, such as humidity in the jungle or sandstorms in the desert, make it difficult to preserve artifacts and conduct excavations. In addition, Africa's history has often been viewed through the lens of colonialism, which has led to an underestimation of its ancient heritage and a systematic disregard or misinterpretation of some finds. However, the growing interest in African archaeology and the use of new technologies give hope that many of the continent's secrets will be revealed. Thus, the ancient riddles of Africa, they represent a vast and poorly studied field for searching for lost civilizations. From unexplained artifacts dating back billions of years to South Africa's incredible megaliths and mysterious tribal lore, this continent may hold the keys to the earliest and most fundamental chapters in human history. If civilizations like Atlantis or Hyperborea did exist, then their influence may have extended to Africa, or the continent itself may have been the birthplace of one of these great civilizations. The disappearance of these crops could have been caused by both global cataclysms and less dramatic, but no less destructive processes, such as climate change or gradual extinction. Africa, with its hidden secrets hidden under the desert sands and jungle canopy, is a silent witness to the fact that the history of our planet is much richer and more diverse than we can imagine, and that in its depths lie the evidence of great civilizations that simply disappeared, leaving behind only whispers of legends and inexplicable traces. Ancient anomalies of Asia and the East, from underground temples to the mysteries of deserts and mountains. As we continue our comprehensive exploration of lost civilizations and continents, we are now on our way to Asia and the Middle East, vast regions that are considered the cradle of many famous civilizations, but at the same time hide many archaeological mysteries that do not fit into the generally accepted chronology. From ancient temples buried underground to unexplained structures in deserts and mountainous regions, Asia is a treasure trove of potential evidence for highly developed cultures whose history has been erased or transformed by time, cataclysms, and human activity. These anomalies point to a more complex and profound human history than we can imagine. One of the most fascinating examples is Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey. This place, discovered in the 1990s, completely changed our understanding of the Neolithic Revolution and the emergence of civilization. Göbekli Tepe is a complex of huge megalithic circles consisting of T-shaped columns weighing up to 20 tons each, decorated with reliefs of animals and symbols. The most striking thing is that this complex dates back to about 11,600 years ago, that is, thousands of years before the construction of Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids, and even before the invention of agriculture and sedentary lifestyle. Traditionally, it was believed that such monumental structures could only have been built by complex sedentary societies. However, Göbekli Tepe was created by hunter-gatherers. Its existence forces us to reconsider the very concept of the origin of civilization and suggests that humanity could have had much more advanced knowledge in social organization in an era that we considered primitive. In addition, the complex was deliberately covered with earth and sand, which raises questions about its purpose and who hid it and why. Perhaps it was a refuge or sanctuary created by survivors from an older, now-forgotten civilization. Further east in India, we come across references to Vimanas, flying machines that we have already discussed in the context of lost technologies. Ancient Indian epics such as the Mahabharata and Ramayana are replete with descriptions of gods and heroes, flying these machines and using weapons resembling modern atomic weapons. Although they may be metaphors or fictions, some researchers see them as echoes of real events and technologies belonging to a highly developed civilization that existed in ancient India or beyond. If these civilizations were developed, then their disappearance could be due to cataclysms or even wars waged with the use of such destructive weapons, as described in the text. The mention of the sunken city of Dwarka, as we have already discussed, also indicates the loss of ancient settlements as a result of rising sea levels or other disasters. In China, there are also numerous legends about the sons of heaven who descended from heaven on flying dragons, bringing knowledge and civilization. The discovery of giant pyramids in China, some of which are covered in vegetation and poorly understood, also raises questions. Although they are mostly considered the tombs of emperors, their scale and number may indicate a more complex and ancient history than that presented in the official chronicle. Some of them, according to researchers, could have been built much earlier than the known dynasties. Legends about ancient underground cities and tunnels connecting different parts of the continent are also widespread and may be echoes of the existence of hidden shelters or infrastructure of lost civilizations. Central Asia and Siberia are another region that, despite its harsh climate, may have been home to ancient cultures. We have already mentioned Hyperborea, located in the north. Some researchers suggest that in Siberia, under a layer of permafrost, may hide the remains of ancient settlements or artifacts, finds such as fossils of animals that appear fresh and died instantly. For example, woolly mammoths found with undigested food in their stomachs, indicating sudden freezing, can be evidence of dramatic and catastrophic climate changes that could have destroyed entire ecosystems and possibly ancient civilizations in the polar regions. The Middle East, the cradle of many famous civilizations, also holds its own secrets. In addition to the already mentioned Baalbek in Lebanon, with its incredible trilithons that call into question the capabilities of ancient builders, there are other unexplained structures, for example, geoglyphs in the deserts of Jordan and Syria, known as desert wheels, which are only visible from the air and date back thousands of years before our era. Their purpose remains a mystery, but like the Nazca lines, they suggest the existence of ancient people's ability to aerial observations or other technologies. The main challenge in studying these anomalies in Asia and the East is their great diversity and geographical dispersion. Many regions are difficult to access due to political instability, conflicts, or extreme natural conditions. In addition, many artifacts remain insufficiently studied, or their age and origin are controversial in the scientific community. As in other cases, the skepticism of academic orthodoxy often prevents widespread acceptance of alternative interpretations. However, the development of new technologies, such as satellite archaeology, LiDAR scanning, and more accurate dating methods, opens up new opportunities for research. These tools allow you to discover hidden structures and analyze them without the need for large-scale and expensive excavations. Thus, the ancient anomalies of Asia and the East, they are powerful evidence that the history of mankind is much richer and more complex than is commonly believed. From Göbekli Tepe, which rewrites the chronology of civilization, to myths about Vimanas and mysterious structures in the desert, these finds and legends point to the existence of highly developed cultures whose achievements and tragic disappearance still remain one of the greatest unsolved mysteries. Some of these civilizations may have been associated with Atlantis, Lemuria, or Hyperborea, while others developed independently, but they all faced challenges that led to their downfall and loss of knowledge. The study of these mysteries is not just an academic interest. It is an attempt to recover lost chapters of our history, understand the reasons for their disappearance, and perhaps learn lessons that will help us avoid similar mistakes in the future. After all, it is in these hidden depths of the East and Asia that the keys to understanding what happened to great civilizations that simply disappeared, leaving only whispers of legends and monumental but silent riddles. Lost languages and ancient scripts. Clues to forgotten civilizations. As we continue our deep dive into the mysteries of lost civilizations, and now that we've examined physical artifacts, myths, and geographical anomalies, our focus shifts to more subtle but equally significant traces of the past. Vanished languages and ancient scripts. These communication systems, found on ancient slabs, papyri, or carved in stone, represent potential clues to the history and culture of the very civilizations that simply disappeared. If these societies possess sophisticated knowledge and technology, then surely they must have developed writing systems capable of recording their wisdom and history. Deciphering these dead languages can reveal direct messages from the depths of time, written by the hands of those who lived on Earth thousands of years before us. One of the most striking examples is the Cretan letter A and the Phaistos disc. The Cretan Minoan civilization, which flourished on the island of Crete in the Bronze Age, c. 2700–1450 BC, created two unencrypted writing systems, the linear A letter and the even more mysterious Phaistos disc. Linear A, consisting of thousands of inscriptions on clay tablets, remains still unencrypted, unlike linear B, which was deciphered and turned out to be an early form of Greek. The inability to decipher linear A indicates that the Minoan language was unique and unrelated to the known language families, which may indicate their deep antiquity or isolation. The Phaistos disc, a clay disc with spirally arranged pictogram impressions, is an even bigger mystery. Its symbols have no analogs in any known writing system, and its purpose and meaning remain the subject of fierce debate. If these writings are deciphered, they could reveal not only the details of the Minoan civilization, but also potentially its connections to even more ancient, now lost cultures. Another intriguing category is unencrypted inscriptions and symbols found in various parts of the world that do not belong to any known historical civilization. For example, inscriptions on Ica stones in Peru, if authentic, contain images that some believe show dinosaurs, brain surgeries, and even aerial vehicles. Although official science considers them fakes, proponents of alternative theories see them as evidence of the existence of an ancient, unknown civilization in South America, which had advanced knowledge and a developed writing system. Another example is the inscriptions on the so-called drop stones in China, allegedly found in the Bayankara caves, which are said to contain microscopic hieroglyphs and tell the story of contact with extraterrestrials thousands of years ago. Although their authenticity is also disputed, such findings continue to fuel hypotheses about lost knowledge. We can also mention runic inscriptions and their connection with ancient Germanic and Scandinavian traditions. Although the runes are known and studied, some of their symbols and mystical significance, as well as their supposed connection to the wisdom of the Aesir and Vanir, may point to deeper, esoteric roots dating back to a time when the mythical Hyperborea may have existed. Perhaps the runes are part of the very northern wisdom that was passed down by the survivors of the polar civilization. The concept of a primary language, or language of the gods, also plays an important role in these theories. Some researchers suggest that in the distant past there was a single, universal language, which was the progenitor of all modern languages. If such a language existed, it could have been the language of the same pre-civilization that then disappeared. Finding common roots in different language families and studying ancient proto-languages can help restore some of this lost linguistic map of the past. However, working with extinct languages and scripts is fraught with enormous difficulties. The main problem is the lack of keys. Bilinguals are texts written in a known and unknown language that could serve as a basis for decryption, such as the Rosetta Stone for Egyptian hieroglyphs. Without such a key, decryption is often reduced to guesswork and statistical analysis, which does not always give unambiguous results. In addition, many artifacts with supposed inscriptions may be fakes or just natural formations that appear similar to writing. Academic science is very cautious about such unencrypted texts, requiring strict evidence of their artificial origin and convincing methods of decryption. However, ongoing research in linguistics, epigraphy, and archaeology continues to bring new discoveries. The development of computer algorithms and artificial intelligence gives hope for a breakthrough in the deciphering of some ancient scripts. These technologies can analyze huge amounts of data, identify patterns and repetitive symbols that were previously impossible for the human brain. In addition, new archaeological digs that may reveal previously unknown texts or bilinguals can always make a difference. Thus, extinct languages and ancient scripts represent one of the most intriguing but also challenging areas in the search for lost civilizations. These silent messages from the past, if they can be deciphered, can become direct evidence of the existence of highly developed society that left behind not only grandiose ruins, but also recorded history, philosophy, and scientific knowledge. If Atlantis, Lemuria, if other civilizations did have a written language, then their texts could shed light on their technology, social structure, the causes of their demise, and their connection to humanity. Unencrypted writing systems are a kind of sealed books of history that are waiting to be read. Studying them is not just an academic task, it is an attempt to restore the lost voice of ancient worlds, to understand their thoughts and ideas, and perhaps to find in these ancient lines answers to questions about why great civilizations simply disappeared and what message they wanted to convey to us, their distant descendants. Astronomical knowledge of the ancients, maps of the starry sky and unexplained observatories. We continue our in-depth exploration of the mysteries of lost civilizations, and now from the consideration of writing and material artifacts, we move on to the field that has always been a source of inspiration and mystery for humanity, astronomy. The idea that ancient civilizations had a deep and accurate knowledge of the starry sky beyond their supposed technological level is one of the most compelling arguments for the existence of highly developed societies that simply disappeared. Ancient maps of the starry sky and monumental observatories scattered around the world point to a complex cosmology, mathematical abilities, and perhaps even technology that allowed them to observe the sky with astounding accuracy. If this knowledge was inherited from lost civilizations, it dramatically changes our understanding of the early history of science. One of the most famous examples is the astronomical orientation of Egyptian pyramids and temples. The Great Pyramid of Cheops is oriented with amazing accuracy to the cardinal directions, and its shafts, as studies show, were aimed at certain stars, such as Sirius and the constellation Orion. The accuracy of this orientation, achieved thousands of years ago without modern tools, is admirable and perplexing. Some researchers, such as Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock, suggest that the location of the Giza pyramids reflects the Orion belt in the sky, indicating the possible use of a complex cosmic map or deep astronomical knowledge passed down from an earlier, unknown civilization, or even from extraterrestrial beings. This knowledge could serve not only to determine time, but also for ritual purposes related to the idea of an afterlife and connection with the cosmos. In addition to Egypt, we see similar phenomena in other cultures. Stonehenge in England, as we mentioned in the chapter on megaliths, also has a clear astronomical orientation, tracking the solstices and equinoxes. It was not just a circle of stones, but a sophisticated astronomical instrument that allowed the ancient inhabitants of Britain to accurately predict the movements of celestial bodies. Nabta Playa in Egypt, an even older megalithic circle, dating from about 7,500 BCE, also exhibits astronomical alignments, indicating the existence of sophisticated astronomical knowledge among prehistoric peoples in North Africa, thousands of years before the advent of the Egyptian dynasties. In South America, the Mayan and Inca cultures, they also had incredible astronomical knowledge. The Mayans developed extremely accurate calendars that surpassed the European ones at the time of Columbus' arrival and predicted eclipses. Their cities, such as Chichen Itza, contain buildings specifically focused on the solstices, equinoxes, and even Venus. This knowledge, like its complex mathematics, raises questions about how it was obtained. Some researchers suggest that this knowledge may have been inherited from a previous, now extinct civilization that had a deeper understanding of the cosmos. For example, the astronomical knowledge found at Tiwanaku, if its 17,000-year-old dating is correct, indicates that this knowledge existed long before the Maya and Inca, which may indicate that it was passed down from one civilization to another. In Asia, especially in China, ancient astronomers were known for their ability to accurately predict solar and lunar eclipses, as well as record the appearance of comets and supernovae, many of which are confirmed by modern data. Finds of ancient star maps, such as the Dunhuang map, dating from around 700 AD, show striking accuracy in depicting constellations and stars, some of which were too dim to be observed with the naked eye without long-term observations and special equipment. This suggests the existence of advanced methods of observation or accumulation of knowledge for thousands of years. However, one of the most intriguing aspects is the references to planets that were discovered by modern astronomy only in recent centuries. For example, some ancient texts and mythologies such as Babylonian and Sumerian tablets mention planets that would be difficult to observe with the naked eye, such as Uranus or Neptune, or even suggest the existence of Planet X, Nibiru, which is still a matter of debate. How could the ancients have had such knowledge? Proponents of alternative theories suggest that this could be the result of contacts with extraterrestrial civilizations or the legacy of highly developed terrestrial civilization that possessed telescopes or other tools for observing distant celestial bodies. Challenges in interpreting ancient astronomical knowledge are numerous. Many texts are mythological or ritual, and separating scientific evidence from symbolism is challenging. Astronomical alignments of megaliths may be random or explained by simpler construction methods. The scientific community is also highly skeptical of ideas about advanced ancient technologies or extraterrestrial contacts, as strong evidence is needed. However, modern research, such as archaeoastronomy, continues to reveal new facets of ancient knowledge. Using computer simulations to reconstruct the starry sky in the distant past, analyzing ancient calendars and texts, and studying architectural alignments allows scientists to gain a more complete understanding of what ancient people knew and use this knowledge. Each new confirmed fact about the high accuracy of ancient astronomical observations pushes us to rethink the abilities of our ancestors. Thus, the astronomical knowledge of ancient civilizations, recorded in their maps of the starry sky, monumental observatories, and texts, is a powerful evidence that humanity in the distant past had a much deeper and more accurate understanding of the cosmos than is commonly believed. This knowledge cannot always be explained by primitive tools and observations, which suggests the existence of lost technologies or the transfer of information from more advanced, now extinct, civilizations. Perhaps it was in the stars and their movements that ancient civilizations saw the keys to their existence, to predicting disasters, or to communicating with the outside world. The study of these astronomical anomalies is not only an attempt to unravel the mystery of their origin, but also to realize that the cosmos has always been an integral part of human existence, and that knowledge about it may have been part of the legacy that was lost when great civilizations simply disappeared, leaving behind only mysterious maps of the starry sky and other planets. Silent stone observatories as a message from the depths of time. Legends of ancient catastrophes and threats of the future, the cyclical death of civilizations. We are nearing the culmination of our study of lost civilizations, and now that we have examined their potential footprints in myth, material artifacts, geography, languages, and astronomical knowledge, it is time to look at the very reason why these great cultures may have simply disappeared: catastrophes. Ancient legends and myths around the world abound with stories of gigantic cataclysms, worldwide floods, falling celestial bodies, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions that destroyed entire civilizations. These traditions, often perceived as mere fictions, can be a collective memory of humanity about real planetary catastrophes that have already occurred in the past and may pose a threat to our future. If history is cyclical, then studying these ancient warnings becomes critical. We have already discussed in detail the Great Flood as a universal myth that is present in almost all cultures of the world, from the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh to the Bible and Native American myths. The ubiquity of this legend about a global flood that destroyed almost all life points to the possibility of a real planetary event that occurred in the relatively recent geological past, perhaps about 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, when there was a sharp melting of ice and a rise in the level of the world's oceans. If it was a real catastrophic flood, then it could have caused the demise of highly developed coastal civilizations such as Atlantis and Lemuria, whose footprints now rest at the bottom of the sea. However, floods are not the only threat. Comet or asteroid impacts are also mentioned in ancient texts as the cause of great destruction. The mythologies of many peoples speak of shooting stars, rain of fire, or sky serpents that brought death and chaos. Modern science confirms that the Earth has been repeatedly bombed from space throughout its history. For example, the late Dryas hypothesis, about 12,900, 11,700. It suggests that the fall or explosion of a comet or asteroid over North America could have caused a sharp cold snap, a mass extinction of megafauna, and possibly triggered the melting of glaciers that led to large-scale flooding. If this event occurred, it could have catastrophic consequences for any existing civilizations at that time. Volcanic activity in supervolcanoes also pose a huge threat. Eruptions of supervolcanoes such as Toba in Indonesia, about 74,000 years ago, could lead to a volcanic winter that caused a sharp cooling, vegetation loss, and famine on a planetary scale, which could significantly reduce the human population and set the development of civilizations back thousands of years. Legends of days without sun, or eternal darkness, can be echoes of such events. Sudden shifts of the Earth's poles or changes in the tilt of the axis, another disastrous hypothesis put forward by some researchers, such as Charles Hapgood. This theory suggests that in the past, the Earth's crust may have shifted relative to the mantle, leading to very rapid changes in climate zones, causing Arctic regions to move to warmer latitudes and thriving subtropics to find themselves in permafrost conditions. This could explain the sudden freezing of mammoths in Siberia with undigested food, as well as the death of entire continents, such as Hyperborea. Although geological science has not yet found convincing evidence for such rapid and global crustal shifts, this hypothesis remains in the realm of alternative explanations for great catastrophes. We cannot exclude catastrophes caused by civilizations themselves. If ancient societies had advanced technology, as we assumed, then they may have reached a point where their own weapons or experiments caused their demise. Myths about weapons of the gods, or chariots of fire, that can destroy cities may be echoes of ancient wars with the use of destructive weapons, such as atomic ones. If Atlantis was destroyed because of the use of force crystals to harm, or because of high-tech weapons, then this is a powerful warning for our own civilization. Seismic activity and tsunamis have also played a devastating role. Many megalithic structures are located in seismically active zones, and their destruction could be caused by powerful earthquakes. Giant tsunamis caused by underwater earthquakes or meteorites falling into the ocean could completely obliterate coastal cities, as could happen with the aforementioned Dwarka. The importance of studying these ancient catastrophes lies in the fact that they are not just stories from the past, but warnings for the future. Modern science is actively studying potential threats to our civilization, climate change, asteroid impacts, and supervolcano eruptions. Understanding how ancient civilizations experienced, or did not experience, such events can provide us with valuable lessons. If we recognize that great societies have already disappeared as a result of such cataclysms, this gives new meaning to our efforts to prepare for them. The cyclical nature of death and rebirth, which many ancient texts speak of, may be not just a philosophical concept, but a reflection of a real historical and geological cycle. Challenges in the study of ancient catastrophes lie in the difficulty of accurately dating and identifying the causes of these events. Geological and paleoclimatic data are often fragmented and subject to various interpretations. Separating mythological exaggerations from real events is a difficult task. However, interdisciplinary research combining geology, archaeology, climatology, and mythology provides an increasingly complete picture. Analysis of ice cores, sedimentary rocks, ancient pollen deposits, and other geological data helps reconstruct climate changes and catastrophic events in the distant past. Thus, the legends of ancient catastrophes, they should not be perceived solely as myths. They are potentially invaluable warnings and lessons from the past that point to the cyclical nature of the demise of civilizations and the real threats to which our planet is exposed. If the lost civilizations really just disappeared, then it was not without reason. Perhaps they were victims of the same global cataclysms that threaten us: floods, space strikes, volcanic eruptions, or even self-destruction. Exploring these ancient tragedies is not only the search for lost worlds, but also the key to understanding our own vulnerability and developing survival strategies. After all, if we do not learn from the past, do not understand what led to the disappearance of those great civilizations, we risk repeating their fate, disappearing as completely as they did, leaving behind only new riddles for future generations. We've come a long and exciting journey exploring lost civilizations and continents that just disappeared. From the mythical Atlantis, Lemuria, and Hyperborea, to the real but inexplicable megalithic structures, from anachronistic artifacts to sunken cities and mysterious ancient maps. Every step of this journey opened up new horizons and challenged the established ideas about the past of mankind. We have seen how ancient legends about the Great Flood and other planetary cataclysms echo geological data, and how scientific skepticism, although an integral part of knowledge, sometimes becomes a barrier to the adoption of revolutionary ideas. Our research also covers the most profound aspects of human existence: unexplained genetic anomalies that point to a possible, different origin, as well as ancient languages and astronomical knowledge that seem too advanced for their eras. We considered the idea of secret societies that might have been the guardians of lost wisdom, and hypotheses about pre-Columbian contacts linking continents long before the navigators we know of. Finally, we turned to the ancient mysteries of Africa and Asia, where the sands and jungles may hide traces of great but forgotten cultures. In the end, what can we say about lost civilizations? Direct, irrefutable evidence that would be unanimously accepted by all scientific communities yet. However, the vast amount of circumstantial evidence, anomalies, and unexplained coincidences around the globe creates a picture that is much broader and more complex than that presented in the official academic chronicle. This data strongly suggests that our world in ancient times was home to highly developed societies that possessed knowledge and technologies that we are just beginning to rediscover. Were they one or more civilizations? Were they the ancestors of modern man or a separate branch of development? Did their knowledge come from outside, from extraterrestrial sources, or was it the result of their own evolutionary leap? These questions remain open. The most likely scenario that unites many of the hypotheses we have considered is the cyclical nature of history. Perhaps humanity, or its predecessors, repeatedly reached high levels of development and then rolled back as a result of large-scale planetary cataclysms, ice ages, global floods, volcanic eruptions, space strikes, or even man-made disasters. Each such event erased most of the achievements, leaving only fragmentary memories in the myths and scattered, difficult-to-explain ruins. Survivors of these disasters could become teachers for more primitive peoples, passing on bits of lost wisdom, which then transformed into legends and esoteric teachings. These whispers from the past carry not only riddles but also the most important lessons for us, modern civilization. We live in an era of unprecedented technological progress, but also at a time when we face global challenges: climate change, resource depletion, the threat of war, and potential space hazards. The history of lost civilizations reminds us of the fragility of existence and how quickly even the most advanced societies can be wiped off the face of the earth. Exploring these mysteries is not just a search for sensationalism. This is a call to rethink our history, to open up to new ideas, and to an interdisciplinary approach that combines archaeology, geology, astronomy, linguistics, and many other sciences. The more we learn about our distant past, the better we can understand our present and prepare for the future. Perhaps the keys to the survival of our own civilization lie in the wisdom of those who lived here before us and who, for some reason, simply disappeared, leaving us with these great but still unsolved mysteries. While many questions remain unanswered, the very act of seeking them enriches our understanding of the world and our place in it. Lost civilizations continue to beckon us, reminding us that the history of mankind is much deeper, more complex, and more amazing than any known record. And who knows what else our planet is hiding, waiting in the wings to reveal its last, most intimate secrets.